I'm gonna start. I feel like a lot of people haven't read uh, the book, so I want to start off by reading like the letter that Dr. Francis Cress Welsing has in the book, just to get people like to understand the importance of reading this and the importance of like passing this on to other people.
Okay.
So this is something that she has in her book. I hope that with this knowledge, the world's non-white people, black, brown, red, and yellow, will work more effectively to neutralize this global and most monstrous form of injustice and chaos. Any person not interested in a definition, analysis, and deeper understanding of worldwide white supremacy must have an interest, conscious or subconscious, in maintaining the same. And there's some more stuff in the letter, but I think that's like the most important part. To me, it's just to understand this urgency here, and that we all can benefit from this text and also benefit from sharing it with other folks.
Sorry, so where is that in the book? What page?
That was Trey.
I'm sorry about that.
Trey, where's that in the book, Trey? I'm also going to read something. This is from the introduction, the very last page. Our definition of justice for this book club is a world where no one is allowed to be mistreated and those who need the most help receive the most help. Like, this is what justice should mean, but in this European-dominated white supremacist world, that's not what justice is. It's like this convoluted, bureaucratic bullshit. So this is when we say justice, this is what we mean. So this is from the introduction, and it says, those who will work for justice and who understand that work as their conscious responsibility will be found in all places, in all walks of life, at all levels of formal education, and at all income levels. There are no class divisions nor language barriers for those who do this cosmic work. It is time to solve this problem once and for all. It is time for justice on planet Earth. So I want to hear you guys' thoughts about this little paragraph. Because she says that it's our cosmic responsibility for Black and non-white people to end racism and white supremacy. She says this is our purpose on planet Earth, to solve this problem. So how do you guys feel about this?
I think that's a deep statement that has a lot of relevance to today. Like, we are almost born in that generation that's been called to do it once and for all, because of course they did it in Civil War, Reconstruction, Civil Rights Movement. Now we're here about the absolute destruction of the entire planet because of environmental racism and economic racism and social racism.
All those are white supremacists.
Right, white supremacy worldwide, right? So I think it's a very pertinent.
Anyone else want to share?
Yeah.
Mary, go.
I would just add to that in a sense that it's what ties into what Ruby said earlier, how she just wants to reflect that through her art, how she's learning and passing on that healing through her artistry. There's another famous quote that it's the artist's job to reflect the times. And in our times, through our perspective, we are experiencing so much oppression, and so it is a cosmic responsibility, because if we're not able to reach self-actualization, we can't even get to the stage where we're helping the state of the earth. We're just dealing with the internal, and the process that's taking means white supremacy has no place here for us, because the process that's taken is prolonging that for us. And yeah.
Yeah, I want to just say I agree with that statement. I do believe, as a melanated being, as a Black person, I have a responsibility to allocate my energy to stopping the genocide of my people, and also ending racism, white supremacy, and liberating the people of planet Earth. And I do believe it's cosmic because it's beyond me, it's beyond my control. I didn't ask for it. I was kind of born into this. Everyone in this group chat was born like under the system of racism, white supremacy, therefore born POWs, prisoners of war. It's very real. It's very real. You know, be aware.
But anyone else like to comment on the question?
Yeah, I'm Ben. I can comment on that. In the paragraph previous, it where is it? I hope this collection of essays will assist Blacks and all other people who have as their cosmic responsibility the resolution of the problem of injustice in the world and identifying the problem of that specific injustice more clearly than ever before. Instead of engaging in our past practices of complaining, moaning, crying, groaning, begging, clapping hands, and singing, we shall overcome when confronted with these death-causing, life-stultifying problems posed by white supremacy. Black people in the US must dissect and analyze those problems to their core. With this knowledge, Black people can take necessary steps to eliminate the problem. So what came to my mind was that we are cosmic beings. Our existence goes beyond this planet. Before we were an egg and a sperm, we were an energy. We were a twinkle in two people's eye. We were a thought. We were a feeling. We were non-physical. So these tactics and these attacks that have been perpetuated on us for the last 1,000 years.
Thousands of years, yes.
You know, since Queen Isabel and King Ferdinand drove the Moors out of Spain and the Iberian Peninsula, who brought them civilization, have been psychological, non-tangible attacks. So it's going to require a spiritual, connected understanding that we are actually cosmic beings that thrive from love, creativity, abundance, beauty, strength, intelligence, and the fact that we have access to that. We as Black people, beyond education, beyond intellect, beyond science, we have access to a source of power that provides all wisdom, and like clapping hands and stomping feet and trying to get something out there in here is an exercise in futility, because it's all right here already. We're cosmic beings connected to everything. So I won't belabor that. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for reading that, because I love that particular part of the book. And when I read that, I got like a surge of energy and like a new purpose. Because before that moment, I was just dedicated to like this traumas everywhere, traumatized society. But now I realized, wow, it's not a traumatized society. This is a white supremacy society, and this is why everything is so fucked up. So I was like, well, my purpose is to, you know, is to fight this to the dying breath, is to destroy this system. And I've just been researching and discovering how to do this, and what is this system, and how does it torment us 24 hours a day. So that's a really powerful statement from Cress Welsing, and also from you, Ben. Thank you.
Before we actually get into the chapter, oh, Moni, what do you want to say?
Oh, I was just going to say, sorry, I got lost for a second because my laptop charger went down and I couldn't find it. So I'm on my cell phone, right? My iPhone, but I'm back. Carry on. You're doing fabulous. Cosmic beings.
Yeah. Like, before we get into like what the chapter covers, which is alienation, anxiety, and narcissism, I just want to like give my definition of racism, white supremacy. to make sure that we are like thinking in a more succinct way. So like I define racism, white supremacy as the basically white people have commandeered and control all areas of people activities, which is economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. And by commandeering those areas of people activity, they are able to subjugate Black people and all non-white people. And we are being genocided, and we are being manipulated, and we are being taught to hate ourselves, and we are being completely suppressed as we are trying to like just simply live. And there's a reason why Black people are being like murdered every single day in every single country on the planet. This is all systematic, and this is all rooted in the culture of white supremacy. So that's my definition. I don't think racism is someone calling you the N-word or someone treating you poorly because of your religion. Racism is a systematic, engineered route to your death and your demise.
Yeah, and I guess like to that point, I think what everyone's saying, and definitely what's being conveyed, is that racism is always this like multi-dimensional thing. But one of the best lines that I read recently is that anti-Blackness is the fulcrum of white supremacy, right? So it cannot be supported without that foundation. And I think that's important to add to the conversation as well. The specific type of racism that comes through anti-Blackness is necessary to sort of set up a foundation for racist ideology as a whole, even as it affects other people that are not white and other people that are not Black.
Agreed. Definitely anti-Blackness is sustained and encouraged by all races, primarily like white people, but of course non-white people can participate in anti-Blackness, and they do so in order to ascend to whiteness and help sustain white supremacy, either subconsciously or unconsciously. I totally agree.
Could I ask Joel who that quote was from? I just taking notes here.
That was actually Joel.
Joel, yeah, Joel. I was asking you what if.
Yeah, you know what? It's an Asian activist here in the Bay. I was looking it up for work, so I can make sure to look it up and hold it to the side.
My definition of racism and white supremacy is those who classify themselves as white and dedicated to abusing and subjugating everyone in the known universe who they classify as non-white, with the end goal of genociding all non-white people, especially Black people being the current priority. And yeah, so that's my definition.
Oh my, I forgot to mention that what was Boss saying, like they're doing this genocide all in the efforts to preserve white genetic survival. So white people have a either subconscious fear of genetic annihilation.
Subconscious or conscious.
Like I said, subconscious or unconscious. Well, exactly what I just said.
Don't like to say unconscious.
Oh no. They have a subconscious or conscious understanding that they are basically going extinct, and they have the possibility to go extinct because they have recessive genes. So people with melanated genes have dominant traits, and because of that white people could actually be genetically annihilated through the natural courses of people just having babies, especially Black people having babies. So because Black men have the highest highest potential to create Black babies, they are the current targets. That's why Black people are being shot every single day by cops. It's definitely an attempt to preserve white genes and prevent white genetic annihilation. That's a huge, huge important part of white supremacy. And when you guys catch up on the reading, you will understand how when we're talking about these things, we should be mentioning racism, white supremacy. I use them as synonyms, but feel free to use them however you want. But white genetic annihilation is going to be something that we all should be aware of.
Yeah, like racism is the result of white genetic annihilation.
The fear of white genetic annihilation.
Yes. And yeah, you're gonna learn about their genetic inadequacy. You're gonna learn how the white folk hate their subconsciously they hate themselves, which is why they develop this hate towards black skin, because they've discovered in their growing and they're evolving, like whenever they were like have realized they were white and they notice black people, they realize that they can never have black skin. So there's this thing where, like, if you can't have something, there's this defense mechanism where you develop an intense hate for it. So they did that towards black skin. And then on top of them not being able to have black skin, they were discovering the world, and they were seeing that most people on the planet are melanated or non-white. So they're saying, we are actually the minorities here, which is why they present all non-white people as a minority. Well, when in actuality, they're only 10%, and non-whites are 90% of the planet. So if you see that, you look at South Africa, how like a couple of million white people were able to dominate the entire region of the country, and how still we have a small percentage of European white descendants dominating the globe right now. This is all the result of racism, white supremacy, in an effort to preserve their white genetic material. This is how you can Google like birth rates, and you will see that in Scandinavian countries, white people are getting like grants and getting extra resources from the government by having more babies. Wherein, black communities and such, they advertise and have like Planned Parenthoods for abortions and whatnot. And you have these white Christians either subconsciously or consciously not wanting people to abort their white babies because their subconscious fear of white genetic annihilation. So this is a lot of stuff that I'm just dumping onto you guys, but yeah. You don't want to comment?
The intro in chapter 1. Chapter 1.
Some of this is not in the book. Some of this is just extra knowledge that I just happen to contextualize with right now with the book. But most of this is in the earlier chapters or introduction.
So yeah, it's hard to hear.
Yeah.
You're going,
introduction chapter 1. I think it's my headphones.
Yeah, I think so too.
I do want to Swab mentioned
Okay, can you hear me better now?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, I was saying, yeah, a lot of what you were just saying sounded a lot of what I just read in chapter 1 in the intro, and then you were saying some of it was other information, but maybe I'm just recalling it. But also I wanted to comment on what Ben said, how he defined cosmic. I felt like was very impactful and important, because I think that we forget a lot of the times how powerful we are, and that I feel from my perspective that we are put in this position to kind of like diamond builds like diamond, like pressure builds a diamond kind of thing. Because even when you read when you get into a lot of the Kemetic teachings that Dr. Francis touches on, a lot of this stuff that she's getting it a lot from ancient Africa, ancient Kemet, a lot of those teachings, a lot of the writings on the wall, the meta-nature, that's where she's getting a lot of this spiritual information from when she's connecting it to the racism and how white people feel inadequate. They got this inadequacy from just observing life and just observing nature. And then you can see how important carbon is. Just look at the stars. What is it? What are you looking at? Darkness. And so that darkness is also the light, is what's containing our light body and our energy. And we are connected to that cosmically because of our melanin. And when you don't have melanin, it's hard for you to be connected with nature. It's hard for you to see yourself as a mirror image of what's around you, like being connected to a tree or a bird, or just feeling the empathy for a dog. Like they think they have this, but they don't, because no human being can do those things who have this type of melanin. And this is why we're also kind of in the state that we are, because we're melanated, because we're compassionate, because we are peaceful melanated beings that are one with everything around us in the nature. They cannot be this. And so because they see what they cannot be, they want to destroy it. Sorry, I had to get that out.
Yeah, and
True.
yeah,
I agree.
yeah, we'll also learn that it's just in white nature to be anti-nature. That's just a part of their culture.
Yeah, and like we're reading this other book called Yurugu, and they talk about how like white people, when they see nature, it's not about immersing themselves in it and being sympathetic, it's about controlling. And a lot of other people don't have the idea of like wanting to control something and seeing it as separate of you. We see ourselves within nature.
I want to read something that's going to support everything that everyone's been saying. Swa, Ash, Saliho, Ben. So this is on page 33. Anxiety, like alienation and Western culture, is the result of the rejection of these albinos. Albinos are like white people, by the way, people with genetic deficiencies in the form of melanin, like having low forms of melanin. Rejection of these albinos because of genetic deficiency status and their subsequent abandonment and migration northward to form what is now recognized as the white race. The global white collective maintains a different appearance from the rest of humankind, and they dislike this difference. Therefore, they tan and use makeup. They remain a minority of the world's people, surrounded globally by a black, brown, red, and yellow global minority. The white global collective remains genetically recessive to the black, brown, red, and yellow global majority, and lives each day and each minute of every hour in a continuous fear of right annihilation by the global majority of genetic dominance. This fundamental fear of albino isolation, abandonment, and genetic isolation is at the core of Western civilization, a civilization structured to ensure white genetic survival. This plan necessitates the subjugation and control of all non-white peoples. I define this subjugation and control as white supremacy. But yeah, that's on page 33.
It's so interesting because it's like this, the way she just lays it out so clearly and scientifically. It's fascinating to me because it's like, is this then a learned behavior? Because by like albinism and white people genetically being inferior, is this nature or is it nurture? Because if you know your race can be wiped out at any given moment, is this a psychological fear or is this like a human survival thing? And if so, then why are they, do you know what I mean? With the whole, you know, go ahead, Saul.
I believe that this is their nature. Their nature, like, if they were left alone on a rock, they would go sell off to find something to destroy, no matter
but then
what.
If that's the case, then why? If that is then why? How did they get here? And for what purpose?
Yurugu.
We're reading this book called Yurugu, which is like the African-centered critique of the European mind, and it goes into detail on why and how these psyches develop. And it's unfortunate that it's the case, but I do agree with why I do believe that there's an inherent need to destroy our, conquer.
Yeah, I just want to mention a book called
go ahead. Son.
This is a book called The Iceman Inheritance, which is written by a white man, which is about the white people and their prehistoric existence and how they have always been a race of sexual aggression and regular aggression and hostility. This is what they've been doing in their ancient times and when they were mating with the Neanderthals. So this is just their nature, and this is something that I believe that we will eventually all come to terms with and understand what that may potentially mean for ending white supremacy.
Yeah. So I'm gonna say that for me, my limit is always biological essentialism. So that's something that that's always going to be a red flag for me if that's part of like the evidence. I do think there is absolutely a logic to be made about the scarcity model, right? And what happens to anyone if they're consistently under
your mic is
scarcity and adverse circumstances, and how
like this,
many times we can create trauma responses and then okay, how's my audio now? I'm trying to talk a little bit louder. Yeah, but I think there is something to be said about how we have trauma responses, right? And we normalize trauma responses, and how that can, in many cases, throughout history, it's shown communities that have kind of lost their moral compass, and there's something to be said there. I personally do not agree with anything that is connected to biological essentialism. I think that's kind of bunk science. And it's also something that has been employed in eugenics and like race medicine and et cetera. And ultimately, I think the goal of racism and racist ideology is to separate people from their humanity, and say white people are just the upper echelon. I'm sorry, we're like moving around. But it's, it's saying that, right? So it's about dehumanizing. And I don't personally feel like I need the risk in logic of biological essentialism at all. There's enough stuff out there in so many different domains that satisfy my needs as somebody that believes in empiricism, to make that. Yeah, definitely. The simplest way that I'm able to grasp it is it's saying that because person A is race B, then that means that they are inherently X, Y, or Z. People are automatically predisposed from a place that they have no personal volition, solely because we're saying that the race and social categories that we put them into are actually part of their biology.
Well, I don't think I'm participating in that. I'm just participating in logic and what I believe to be the realistic world we live in.
Yeah, I wanna. Oh, it's gonna be really quick. I just wanna read my handwritten definition of racism, white supremacy, because I think this is, to me, like a lot of the stuff that I'm hearing is, it's like out of context, and we're speaking from the context of the book, hopefully. But this is my definition of white supremacy. The local and global power system structured and maintained by persons who classify themselves as white, whether consciously or subconsciously, determines this system consists of patterns of perception, logic, symbol formation, thought, speech, action, and emotional response, and conducted simultaneously in all areas of people activity: economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. The ultimate purpose of this system is to prevent white genetic annihilation on Earth, in which the overwhelming majority of people are classified as non-white. So yeah, this right here is the truth. This is like not pseudoscience. This is not anything that's like that complex. It's very vast, of course, but the fact that this can be historically proven too, like white people historically have been genociding people for a very long time, and they have used their institutions to instill self-hate onto all non-white people, and they have completely commandeered our communities and there's a reason why everyone we know who is black is suffering. There's a reason why everyone we know who is not white is suffering. That's white supremacy. Doesn't require. Go. No, I'm done. Go, Ash. Go.
I think there's a difference between like white people and white supremacists. And like, I don't think that it's in their nature personally, because like, I also read a book about the witch trials in the 1600s and how like killing all of those white women was like done on purpose to get rid of a lot of their ideas about like nature. And a lot of those women worked as like healers and did like a lot of like midwifery and things like that. And there was a point where everything was like they were trying to get people away from spirituality, like white people in Europe and stuff. So I think there's been like a concerted effort by like white supremacists and like, you know, white people in power to make sure that other white people who do have a different type of like nature, who are more inclined to like work with nature, to like get that out of them. And I think it's more philosophical than nature and like cultural than nature, personally. Because there's like an effort to suppress that type of, to suppress anything that's not within this like individualistic white supremacist nature.
I totally agree with what Ashley just said. And I want to just say, I want to thank everybody for the articulations, because it's just blossomed my thinking and understanding of the chapter. So just thank you, everyone. And to just go back to what Ruby had said about the question of, well, what Ashley just elaborated on it being, is it by way of nature or nurture? I kind of feel like it's both. Maybe it became a way of nurture by the white supremacist mind, like understanding their place in life, which I think a lot of white people have to do. But because of the nurturing of the programming and white supremacy being in place, it's become a way of nature, in a sense that we have also adopted it as well. So why it doesn't just take a white person to be a white supremacist, we can practice it on ourselves based on the conditioning that's come on down to us. And just like this the second chapter elaborates about alienation, narcissism, and anxiety, all these experiences that the European naturally will go through in understanding their place in society, they've literally projected it into society. So we also experience it, in the sense that reading the narcissism breakdown and understanding that allowed me to basically see some traits in myself when I basically was differentiated from my family. Hello?
We can hear you.
Okay. So when I was like differentiated from my family and was the first in my family to have a degree, I felt like I maybe developed some of these personality traits and them not understanding me and becoming more internalized or narcissistic, and understanding how the pressures in society will maybe like social media is a double-edged sword, and it can force us to be narcissistic in a way. And like the concept of selfies and the way movies are geared into believing we are the one, like there's a formula of programming that will like push this onto the youth, like the ideas of narcissism, anxiety that we experience on social and through social media or just through life experiences, and the forced alienation that we experience through watching TV programs or going through mental health breakdowns and it being stigmatized, and the forced stigmatized through the system of white supremacy that we experience as melanated people. You end up feeling alienated. So it's almost like they forced they've understood the form, they've understood what they experience, and it's forced onto society to also experience. So we almost psychologically experience their confusion through our own, as well as being oppressed.
Yep. Yeah, I'm so happy for Mary putting us back on the subject of alienation. This is on page 23. And this is one of the many reasons why alienation manifests within the white psyche. And I agree with what Swab was saying, and I also agree with what Af was saying. But at this point, it doesn't really matter if it's in their nature or not. We need to stop being distracted by arguing on what causes them to behave the way they do, and just get to the issue of solving racism, white supremacy. Even that is a distracting tool, arguing about if they're inherently bad or good. But this is on page 23, and it's on chapter 2. White skin is a form of albinism. There is no difference, microscopically speaking, between the white skin of a white person and the skin of a person designated as albino. My central thesis here is that white-skinned peoples came into existence thousands of years ago as the albino mutant offspring of black-skinned mothers and fathers in Africa. A sizable number of these black parents have produced, rejected, and then cast out of the community their genetic defective albino offspring to live away from the normal black-skinned pigmented population, with the awareness of their rejection and alienation as in leper colonies. The white tribes' eventual migration northward to escape the intensity of the equatorial sun of the southern hemisphere left the albinos eventually situated in an area of the world known as Europe, now recognized. So yeah, to me, this is like a really great snippet of like brief history of how she's going to like the many years it took to like create the new version of European that we see now. But she doesn't break down that black people did have babies that were albino, and eventually they were like pushed away or they left, and they were able to mate and create what we now have as people who classify themselves as white. Does anyone want to like chime in?
Can I chime in right quick?
Definitely, please. Just do it.
So in that migration, we have to take into consideration that the topography of the area that they migrated to was extremely hostile environment with snow and cold and not a lot of life. They had to eat animals, and when they couldn't get animals, they had to eat each other. And so that dog-eat-dog savage nature, as opposed to a tropical people that can go outside of their place where they live and pick a banana or a mango or get some fish, and you see one of your neighbors walking through the area with some fish, and you have a basket of mangoes, and you might barter mangoes for fish, plenty of abundance. Where the earth is the friend of the black man. We love the earth. The earth nurtures us and takes care of us, and vice versa. And it's the opposite for. And I, just not to beat a dead horse about the nature of the white man. My mother's a white lady.
It's fine.
So, and my father's, a black Yoruba. He's from here, but he's the black man. And so I have firsthand experience with the nature of white folk, being, half white myself. And it all boils down to this little excerpt that the writer quoted. Motherwell is saying that we must even reconcile ourselves to the fact that Western man, this is in the intro, the Western man, in choosing centuries ago to exploit nature rather than to marry her, has doomed himself with an industrial technology for which there is neither the wisdom nor the political mechanism to control. So the ultimate solution, now we talk about the problem, the ultimate solution is for us to recognize and connect with ourselves, with the planet. Understand that the law, the universal law, these are laws. You know, man can't really write law. Nature creates law. Man can create rules that benefit one group or another. But there is a law that is in place that has been violated, and there's evidence that we're being confronted with the consequences right now with COVID. This is a result of our unnatural behavior with the planet, with animals, and with nature. And as a result, now we're being forced to connect with nature and to
preach, brother Ben. Preach, brother Ben. Preach.
Okay, I'm becoming
No,
preachy.
it's good. No, I'm saying you're on point. It's all good.
But that's all I had.
I agree. I agree with everything you said. Very true, very accurate. Alienation is the first behavior pattern that Dr. Francis Cress Welsing breaks down in chapter 2. And we all should be aware that like people who classify themselves as white have sustained the narrative of their superiority through their philosophy, through their media, through their films, and through their literature as well. And they also reveal their anxieties and their fears and their subconscious projections in their literature as well. And there's a really great quote from Mark Twain in the book on page 29. And I think it's really important to read it so we get a testimonial from a white person talking about how they have skin envy, how they don't even appreciate the skin that they're born with. So I'm gonna read this quote. This is from Mark Twain's essays. Nearly all black and brown skins are beautiful, but a beautiful white skin is rare. How rare one may learn by walking down the street in Paris, New York, or London on a weekday, particularly an unfashionable street, and keeping count of the satisfactory complexions encountered in the course of the mile. Where dark complexions are masked, they make the whites look bleached out, unwholesome, and sometimes frankly ghastly. I could notice this as a boy down south in the slavery days before the war. The splendid black satin skin of the South African Zulus of Durban seemed to me to come very close to perfection. I can see those Zulus, yet handsome and intensely black creatures, moderately clothed in loose summer stuffs, whose snowy whiteness made the black all the blacker by contrast. Keeping that group in my mind, I can compare those complexions to the white ones, which are streaming past this London window now. I'm going to continue the quote. The advantage is with the Zulu. I think he starts with a beautiful complexion and it will last him through. And for the Indians, brown, firm, smooth, blemishes, pleasant, and restful to the eye, afraid of no color, harmonizing with all colors, adding grace to them all. I think there is no sort of chance for the average white complexion against the rich and perfection tint. I apologize if I read that a bit sketchy. It's hard to read the book on the computer. But what it's saying is that this person is expressing his admiration for Black people and Native Americans, and he's projecting his own fear that white people actually cannot even compete with the richness of these melanated beings, and that's reiterated here. I think there is no sort of chance for the average white complexion against that rich and perfect tint. To me, this is a projection of the inherent fear that white people have of the fear of white genetic annihilation. I think it's here, I think it's coded in this text, and I think it's very, very relevant here. Can you guys shed some knowledge with me on that, or chime in a bit about what I just said?
Well, that about knocked me out when I saw that Mark Twain writ that. And just before that quote, Herman Melville in Moby Dick writ. And if you've read Moby Dick, the the time period that was written in and like what actually happens in that book. It's crazy to go back and read that and actually understand and put this stuff into context of like what's happening even today. Is crazy. I'm just geeking out. I'll let someone else speak.
Yeah, what I really like about this book and about learning how the white psyche is just infested with alienation, anxiety, and narcissism. With this book, it allows us to decode like our reality, decode like TV, music. Like if you think about a lot of like popular like even H.P. Lovecraft, white people love him because he wrote about characters who were like, you know, loners and who were like afraid of like the natural things, like the universe. He painted the universe to be this terrifying thing where the universe is like not supposed to be scary, just like a part of nature. But because white people are anti-nature, they create everything that they create kind of manifests, will show its true selves of being white supremacy propaganda, in the sense that white people write sci-fi stuff and nature's a bad guy. Like the things in space are bad. They're dying because some kind of so-called natural disaster. So it's just something I like about this book. It allows me to decode everything. Whatever I'm consuming, I could decode it because I think everything is interrelated. And the way that the Europeans have designed this white supremacy is that everything is self-supporting as well. So even if you think it's not supporting white supremacy, I'm pretty sure it is in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting too about H.P. Lovecraft is Dr. Welsing really like gets it, because like a lot of his writing is about fear of the other, and he writes in his nonfiction about being afraid of immigrants, brown people, and Black people, and miscegenation, specifically about race mixing, which is what like Dr. Welsing talks about, is that type of fear. And I think that a lot of our science fiction has a lot of those themes in it because a lot of people take from H.P. Lovecraft. So it's really interesting to think about how modern things that we read and watch really stem from what a lot of things that Dr. Welsing talks about.
I'm not up to date on Lovecraft. Could somebody break it down in a short summation? Like, is that a new TV show?
We're talking about the actual writer, H.P. Lovecraft, who was like a known practicing white supremacist who hated Black people. And like a lot of his books center around white men who are alienated from themselves and the world. And he paints the universe as this big, scary place where everything in it wants to kill you. And personally, I think whenever like in mass media culture, I think a lot of things exist to continue the programming of white supremacy. Like, for example, in the movie Predator, it's very clear that other alien is a Black person. And in most sci-fi, the other is always going to be a Black person. And that's like just the rhetoric of white supremacy being found in everything that we watch and consume.
Thank you for that. Also, have you seen John Sayles, A Brother from Another Planet? It's got a nice, better perspective of the Black man. Yeah, he breaks it.
Actually watch that. It's a classic. Yeah.
Great film.
Is that on Prime or Netflix or what?
Something that download, I think. Yeah. I'll send it to you, Ben. I'll send it to you. Yeah.
Well, you guys, I want to give a legal perspective as a lawyer of 25 years. I still have my bar license in Washington State, but it's interesting, the miscegenation referenced by the prior speaker. I'm sorry that I can't pronounce your name, Salia? I'm not sure who was saying the prior reference about the Mark Twain quote, but the fear of miscegenation is so strong, as you know. Who was it?
I think it was Ruby, right?
Oh, okay. Thank you for that input. And this is such a deep conversation for one, and sorry that I'm walking around because I'm trying to make my dad some lunch.
Okay.
But this is deep. It's reminding me of like the Harlem Renaissance and James Baldwin sitting around, and people are not just ruminating about issues, but actually acting on it as activists as well as intellectuals. So mind, body, spirit, we're putting it all together. But in the law in the United States, as most of you knew, it was illegal. Well, you all know this probably.
to mix the races, as they said. So miscegenation statutes weren't struck down by the US Supreme Court until like the 1960s. In my lifetime, I was born in 1960 in Alabama. So it was illegal to marry a Black person. It was illegal to have a baby from a Black person. So that fear, all of the factors that are coming into play that you guys are referencing maybe underlie these laws that were passed to self-preserve their fear of annihilation, so then destroy the other, as well as prevent the mixing of our so-called inferiority, which is really our superiority. So I think this is very deep and wonderful thinking to reconstruct what really is versus what has been presented. Yeah, yeah, good stuff.
I want to share this theory. We're going to be covering a lot of theories in this from Welsing. This one is the color confrontation theory, and it's just going to allow us to understand the white psyche even further and decode this wicked reality they've given us. So the color, this is on page 18. The color confirmation, the color confrontation theory views all of the present battlegrounds and the keywords battlegrounds in the world today as vivid reflections of this alienation towards others. The destruction and aggressive behavioral patterns displayed throughout the world by white peoples towards all non-white peoples is evidence of the inner hate, hostility, and rejection they feel towards themselves, and a deep self-alienation that has evolved from their genetic inadequacy. Their genetic inadequacy being their inability to produce large amounts of melanin. So I like to ask you guys the question, have you guys seen this behavior? Can you guys contextualize this behavior and an experience that you've had before interacting with a white person or a victim of white supremacy?
Do you mean like when they envy our hair or want to touch us or fetishize us, or?
Any example you want to share?
Well, there's so many. Let's see. Well, I'm gonna let other people do it because I'm actually just too distracted trying to make my daddy a plate. So go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna give one short example. I used to work with like these two really creepy white people, and they would project a lot of like negative energy onto me. One particular time, saying that I was the type of person to have bodies under the floorboards, but that I don't think I've ever seen a Black Jeffrey Dahmer. Yeah, so that's just something. Just the constant projection is something of white nature, projecting their sick nature onto other people. Anyone else like to share?
Yeah, I have an example where, living in London has exposed me to a lot of alienations that has been projected by white people, and I do feel like just want to share something really brief and quick. Let me remember it better and then come back to me. Does anyone else want to share?
I can give like a quick example because there are many, but this was just an example of my previous role that I had done, working part-time as an administrator to a hearing therapist. And she was middle class and she was quite fascinated by me because I feel like this was not the closest interaction she had with a person or Black woman, because she had a previous employee who was an older Black woman, but maybe somebody who was like educated. So the kind of conversations we had, she was often surprised by my knowledge base or just surprised about the things that like if I told her I went to the theater, the shock that I'd see in her face, like that I was taking part in such social cues that I don't know, she maybe had classed as, I don't want to make too many presumptions, but one thing that I had noticed progressively about her, she wanted to know a lot of my life. She did give me advice about certain avenues in life, but there was a time where I was just basically doing my thing, checking her dictations, and I correct information on her work on the dictations for the client's therapy sessions, and she would make like just minor mistakes, just minor grammars, and I would correct them. So she'd come downstairs and I explained that I want to get rid of these corrections, and she said, no, I don't make mistakes. All my dictations are as they are. Print them. I will tell you then correct it, and then you can reprint. But I was just I was like, it has a squiggly line. Anybody can correct this. I should be able to do this. But there was a false sense of intellectual oppression to keep a certain power at play. And me recognizing that just really depressed me in my role. And that's just an example of trying to force superiority of even intellect, just based on her surprise of me being able to like mentally or academically climb some form of understanding of above her, not above her intellect, but I can spar in a sense, and I don't think that was appreciated.
Thanks so much for sharing. My example, I used to work at this fast fashion company, and my manager was a white woman, and I remember them saying, like, Trey, whenever I tan, I'm almost as dark as you. And I couldn't fathom this white woman being my skin color and ever. And I remember they went on vacation and they came back and then they were tan. And they weren't on my skin color at all. They were like, Trey, look, I'm as dark as you now. Because they came back from vacation. And to me, this is like being alienated from your like physical presence where you feel that you have to tan. And then in your mind, projecting that you actually are as dark as a Black person. So yeah, this is just, it's like a really brief example of like me dealing with a white person's projection and own battle with alienation from their own skin color. And not to be like, not to box it in, I don't think alienation is just skin color. I think it's like it's a complex. It could be anything. It's
it's not just. They don't just experience skin tone alienation. They experience like human alienation. They just feel like because of their skin color, they can't do anything right. You know, they just, I don't know. They just feel like it manifests a lot of insecurities amongst them.
Previous book club, we were reading Delectable Negro. And in that book, the white people always project this idea that Black people in Africa were cannibals. And like this whole time, like they were the ones that were cannibals actually eating Black people during slavery. And it's really like, and I think that like stereotype has persisted for like until now. People still think that.
They were eating Black people on a regular basis, right?
Yeah.
It's pretty common, where they would have to like, it was like in the dialogue in like the Senate and stuff like that, talking about coming up with cannibal like laws against it and stuff. So yeah.
I just wanted to. I asked that question because people probably aren't aware of how normalized consuming Africans were during antebellum slavery. So.
Well, it was very common, They was eating. Read a bit, like read The Delectable Negro or listen to our discussions on that book, and you will be mortified and saddened by our ancestors' experiences.
It's another book actually. I'm gonna try and research it in this time and send it to the group because it's so important. They even like dictate cannibalism as a form of like medicinal. They used to like, we're all aware of the British Museum has so much of the artifacts from ancient Egypt. They used to not too long ago, in fact, eat the remains of the mummies because it was so nutritious and high in melanin content as a way of healing themselves. I'm going to look for the book to try and send it.
Yeah, I want to read this from page 19. Most important, the alienation dynamic forces the individual away from all manifestations of self-understanding and self-respect, including the most fundamental respect for one's genetic makeup. So this is why white people don't care about their kids, like when they reproduce a whole bundle of their genetic material, they give it to someone else to raise, or they teach it how to build AK-47s or how hunt and kill things to prepare them for something that will eventually kill them, which is like warfare. Because most white people, I believe, are aware that they are participating in this race war called white supremacy, this genocide. So even scrolling today, I saw a bunch of, like, in Russia, they do this thing where like these 6 and 7-year-olds are taking apart and building AK-47s and assault rifles during like this competition. So, you know, white people teach their kids how to like use military like weapons and and we're not teaching our Black children not even about race and white supremacy. So, which shows like the current situation of our people, I feel like. Any comments on that?
It's quite interesting though, because I feel like there's been a kind of a shift in attitudes. Like you were saying, so that they're preparing their children for war, like freaking building rifles. But I do feel like non-white people and Black people specifically are kind of becoming more educated on white supremacy as a subject with everything going on. And the more that happens, the more we're building a repertoire and like tools that are more effective in fighting white supremacy other than just freaking rifles and freaking bombs and shit. Because this is cosmic. Like, there's no weapon that can destroy the truth. You can't, you know.
Yeah, I agree. I think the Cress theory is a great combat.
Yes.
It's like a counter to white supremacy.
Oh,
I don't know if you guys can hear me. I can only talk with my headphones in, and I can't hear when I put.
Okay.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Oh, I was Ruby, what you were saying, I absolutely agree with. Just was gonna reiterate, like, some of the things that we can like combat this racism is what we're basically already doing now. But the Cress theory, I think on page 4, Dr. Francis gives like a definition of it, and it uses those terms melanin and genetic deficiency, and also breaks down a little bit of the psychology of it, and kind of sums up a lot of what we're saying today in just her definition of her theory and what it means.
Mm. Oh, and
I read it, but I don't have the book in front of me.
This is what I mentioned earlier about that mechanism why people have developed because they can't get black skin. They develop that defense mechanism I mentioned, and this is what it's actually called. It's on page 5, and she says one of the most important of these defense mechanisms was reaction formation, a response that converts at the psychological level something desired and envied but wholly unattainable into something discredited and despised. Now, who could think of something very discredited and despised in today's society?
Blackness, black melanin.
Yeah, black people. Yeah,
Black skin.
Yeah.
Anything black, and everything black is considered taboo, bad. The black, anything black.
Yeah.
Especially in the English language, we're just so derogatized throughout. Black male.
Especially, it's.
Yeah.
And now everybody knows that they're using that as their defense when police say, I felt threatened. And so one of my favorite signs at our protest here in Berkeley was Shelby. Max, you had the sign that my skin is not a threat to you.
But little does she know, it actually is. It's a conscious and subconscious threat.
Good point. Yeah.
So,
I mean, the color confirmation theory, if simplified to like the very core, is when white people see black people in their being, they feel fear, they imagine themselves being extinct, they imagine themselves not having access to what they truly want. So it's a confrontation of color. It's like it's a very, very amazing breakdown of it. But
yeah. It could be and they could experience all those sensations on a subconscious level, meaning that they could experience everything Trey said, but not be aware of it. But and this is how complex our minds is, and this is the danger of being unconnected with your unconsciousness, which is what the white European has done to us Black folk as well. We have become detached from our consciousness, which is what we will reconnect with throughout this book club. I am positive.
I think this. Oh, go ahead.
No. Go ahead, Ben. You haven't spoken for a while. No, Ben, go ahead, because I was going to change the subject matter like completely.
Oh, okay. I'm just going to comment on the alienation is the very dynamic and pushes human beings away from respectful and harmonious relationships. That excerpt from page 19, that what came to mind was like in East Oakland and many other of our communities, impoverished communities, where crime and drugs is high, and the total disrespect of each other. People that look, that look like me, that look like us, are, the hate is perpetuated. That's white supremacy in the ultimate gaslighting frame. Whereas we have been conditioned to aspire to the norms and culture and behaviors of a person, of a people, that because they can't have what we have, turn it into something undesirable and get the entire world really to aspire to be like something that hates you and that is against you.
Yeah.
And have adopted the behaviors, which is like what we have in office now, the ultimate gaslighter. They know they're savage, they know they're unconscionable, and they have to dehumanize you, make you an animal, make everybody else the animal to justify their inhumanity.
Yeah. I wanna. This statement from the book. I don't have the page number, but it's from the earlier chapters. It's gonna support what Ben had just said. I just want to continuously use the book to support what we're saying. So when we're like on bigger platforms, we're able to articulate ourselves and combat racism, white supremacy using the terminology that is gonna best do that. So when this definition of racism as a strategy for white genetic survival is mastered, one can understand precisely not only the present global power formations and realignments, i.e. the USA/USSR linkage and the European unification, but also all present urban non-white centered epidemics. I'm speaking of the concurrent urban crisis of drug use, drug addiction, drug-related murder, teenage pregnancy, infant mortality, Black academic underachievement, Black teenage unemployment, Black adult male unemployment, Black male incarceration, single parent, female head of households, chronic welfare dependency, poverty, AIDS, and homelessness. These very disturbing individual and group destructive pathological forms of behavior are the direct and indirect byproducts of a behavior power system fundamentally structured for white genetic survival locally and globally. Oh yeah, this is on page II, and I'm just gonna continue this little bit right here too, which is on IV. The reason that the Black male is and always has been central to the issue of white supremacy is clarified by the definition of racism as white genetic survival. And the collective white psyche, Black males represent the greatest threat to white genetic survival because only males of any color can impose sexual intercourse, and Black males have the greatest genetic potential of all non-whites to cause white genetic annihilation. Thus, black males must be attacked and destroyed in a power system designed to assure white genetic survival. And the white supremacy mindset, consciously or subconsciously, black males must be destroyed in significant numbers, just as they were in the earlier days when there was widespread open lynchings and castration of black males, and during the Tuskegee syphilis study from 1932 to 1972, when a large number of black males were used and destroyed by whites. Today, we are witnessing a more subtle, systematic approach to white genetic survival. The destruction of black males is now indirect, so that the black males themselves can be led to participate and then be blamed for their own mass deaths. But yeah, so basically, definitely what Ben said is manifested in what I just read on how like gang violence and drug violence are all byproducts of white supremacy, and it's all used to sustain white genetic survival. And that is no mistake, that is by design. East Oakland is an impoverished area by design. South Central LA is an impoverished area by design. These are created ghettos. And yeah.
Yeah, and if you think of like a lot of the music that a lot of music that black people and non-white people consume, especially like the rap and hip hop, especially ones that's like about killing and about like rape, well, killing and objectifying women, that mentality fits more of a white supremacist mentality and their behavior. You know, white supremacists like love to kill black people by the dozens and millions. They love to, you know, rape and pillage women and cities and countries. This is a white supremacist mentality. It represents more of that than like an African consciousness. So it's really important to like, you know, sway from like letting that music affect you, or you know, wanting or seeing that music as cool or constructive, because it shouldn't even be considered music according to compensatory logic. If it's not constructive, it's not. It's just noise. It's not music. So
also, like, I wanted to add on to that, in that it's very like individualistic. It's always about me making it and me consuming, and I think that's really like goes against also like what a lot of African culture is about in terms of like community and like spreading resources. And so I think too, like that's a lot of white supremacy that is kind of forced onto us to constantly think about me, and buying and buying. So
yeah, and I think thanks for saying that, because it's very individualistic, and I think what white supremacy has done such a good job at is it has given the white collective, without even knowing, a unconscious collective. You know, all white people are designed to support white supremacy, whether they know it or not. But everyone is so-called taught to be individualistic. So all the non-whites are trying to be individualistic. So the black people and non-whites, we don't have a collective consciousness. We don't think collectively. Like, it's really hard to, you know, get things started with a lot of black people, and it's really hard to build with black people, especially black people of the lower class of like poor working class people. And that's really, and the problem is because we have no collective consciousness anymore. It's been totally destroyed. So that's something we have to understand and work on rebuilding.
I was gonna say.
Huh?
I was gonna say that that this is their culture. This system that they've created, that we have to kind of that we've not agreed to, but unconsciously have agreed to. This is their culture, and this is why they're holding on. This is why they fight so hard for it. This is why they love it so much. This system is their culture. These holidays are their culture. This way of life is their culture, you know, and they take bits and pieces of our culture and what they like from it and what's cool and what they can wear and use and borrow, our music and our fashion and lots of things. Not even that, just on an intellectual level, because we invented math. That's all the way real. We invented language. We invented writing. We invented this civilization. We invented civilization, but this system.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. We definitely did. invent everything. We just did not have that cultural awareness that another culture could be designed in such a way to destroy. Its survival is sustained through destruction. This is how white supremacy exists and survives, through the destruction of the planet and other people. So we therefore, we do not have a culture, I would argue, because we don't have a culture that protects and sustains the Black race, nor do we have a proper education system, because education, again, is supposed to be designed to sustain and protect the future existence of the Black race, which is why we have highly educated, stupid people who are teaching white people how to build death lasers to shoot in the air above Africa. So when Africa does try to fight back, they can just shoot laser beams at Africa, who have no kind of defenses for that kind of technology. So this is the sort of like danger our people are in, because we have like highly educated Black people creating, like, giving power, continuous power to white people. And we have to understand that our goal, our end goal here is like power. We want true Black power, and we attain that through critical mass and forcing the white supremacists to do something about. These millions of people are aware that you guys, this is what's happening now. Okay, we as white supremacists, we're just gonna kill you all, and then if they do that, we can actually have opportunity to fight back, and and no longer have to live in this fake matrix, but actually like fight the war that they've been waging on us for centuries. Or the white supremacists be like, okay, all right, we had our fun. What can we do to create this so-called justice you guys want? Two options, right there. And those should be the only two options that we accept.
Yeah, I'd like to actually read from the passage, which kind of like, I got a question that came from it. I'm gonna try and share the screen, because just so if my reading has holes in it, you can at least see what I'm doing. Bear with me. Yeah. Yeah, bear with me. Then. Freud and the others have failed to understand the failure of parental love is rooted in the original rejection by the Black mothers and fathers in Africa. The albinoid white mutant offspring who were forced to try to love themselves if they were to survive, but they could not arrive at a point of true acceptance, because there was never a parental group acceptance or validation at the time that the whites mutated from the Blacks. Because whites failed to be accepted by the original parents, the original Black parents, they evolved their subsequent compensatory pattern of white supremacy. Yet beneath the stance of the white supremacy and white grandiosity, the insecurities of inadequacy, inferiority, and vulnerability remains to be displayed alternately. Okay. And then it goes on to like descriptions in Greek mythology and then this, okay. Yeah, so then it goes on to descriptions of Greek mythology. And for me, I just wanted to, and they had mentioned the Oedipus complex and the need to want to, Oedipus basically was in love with his mother, although it was a love-hate situation. I just wanted to ask the question of, even in relationships where people are interracial and it's a white man with a Black woman, I feel like there's a certain level of conditioning that happens where like it's incorporated in through sex, like BDSM is the power dynamics of control. I feel like there's always this love-hate relationship that happens within what's the word? Could someone repeat it for me?
Interracial
relationships, and it's either, depending on what the race is, it's either like a condition, it's used as a conditioning tool to remove that kind of cultural aspect from that person. I would even give an example of it happening within Central to Africa, my uncle got married. He's West African. He got married to somebody who was Eritrean, who also had Arab in their culture. And every time he spoke Creole, which is which is a British dialect of the African collective language there, she referred to it as pig's English and didn't want to hear it or have anything to do with it. Where she spoke Arabic within her own culture, and that's just like another mechanism of it. Of even though they're together and they're supposedly in love, there's a hatred that even comes up through the relationship of his expression of his culture, or any kind of connection to his form of nature. And I just wanted to get people's interpretations of that.
That's deep. That's really deep.
That's also something I can confirm from personal experience when dealing with interracial relationships. Is like it is something that I've experienced. It's all good when it came to like his family and being involved with his culture. As soon as it came to mine, it was just a bit rocky.
When you say interracial, do you mean with another non-white person or with a white
person?
Oh, yeah.
White guy. Yeah, and his dad's side was Australian and his mother's side was Irish. So.
Yeah. I just want to quote Neely Fuller. According to compensatory logic, interracial couples between whites and non-whites can only be three things: tacky, trashy, or terroristic. You know, so this is why until the system of racism, white supremacy is ended, we should create those kind of relationships. Wow, you have already ordered. Is that the old one? Is that
the old school?
Wow.
1971 original.
Wow, man, you're really just like.
What did he just show? I missed it. What did Ben just show? I missed it.
The book that's what I was talking about.
Lily Fuller?
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, we all have it. Yeah, we all need this book for this book club. So yeah, it's wow.
I think this is thing. I mean, thanks Ben for sharing that. I think this is actually from the compensatory code, and it's really short, but it says most white people hate black people. The reason that most white people hate black people is because whites are not black people. If you know this about white people, you need know little else. If you do not know this about white people, virtually all else that you know about them will only confuse you. I think that's very true. And I don't think successful interracial can happen. I only consider them tragic arrangements. Until the system of racism, white supremacy is ended, there can be fairness and balance and equilibrium and love, sex, and war. But until then, it's going to be just, for me, it's just weird. Like, there's this entire group of people who classify themselves as white are killing and genociding and your people, and yet you think it's cool.
So yeah, as me, a person in the past, I've been sexually sewered by many white people, but no more. I will no longer let white people sexually sewer me.
What does that mean? What does sewered mean?
It's what happens when you have sex with a white person. You're being sexually sewered because the power dynamic is so off, and white people they experience sex and aggression on the same level. It's like the same thing for them. Like, I don't want to get into psychology right now behind that, but we could talk about that when we talk about the Iceman inheritance. But yeah, it's just part of like and under the system of white supremacy, Black people and non-white people are treated as children in terms of where we can live, how much money we can have, where we can go, what we can do. Whereas a white man can go out and do whatever they want. White people are totally free, white men in particular. So a white person with a non-white person is basically like a white person dating a child. Should be considered child rape if you really truly understand the system we're living under. Also, if you're a prisoner of war, can a prisoner of war consent to sex with the enemy or with another white person?
So I'm probably the only one in the room that was married to a white man or woman, but married to a white man for 6 years. And then we were together all through UC Berkeley, and he walked across the country with Native Americans he didn't really relate to white people, but he was white and he was the first to go to college. And then we got divorced. And out of that imperfect union, most definitely many problems, but different variations. But I have my son, Matthew, who you both know, or all three of you know. I think Ben might have met him. He's a director, writer, actor as well, fully conscious and trying to help people get free as well as himself. So a lot of what you say is true. I guess the trash, the trauma, the tragedy, I forgot what the three categories were. I don't know where we fall in, but I actually had the income and the position as a lawyer to move, and he didn't have it, but he has, you know, white skin privilege for sure. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's an interesting conversation. So all to be taken in and processed, because I am intentionally trying to not have a interracial relationship. So I am solo single, but you know, whenever I met somebody, that'd be great. But aside, those are good points. But I'm just trying to tell you that with respect to sometimes the process, maybe the next generation, Matthew is going to make a difference in this messed up world with his raised consciousness and awareness.
Yeah.
100%.
So I'll send you all his videos. He's been doing some street action up in LA. And
yeah, so it's really important to understand
tear
like,
gas.
Interracial couples between like the non-whites and the whites. I mean, the non-whites and the non-blacks. I mean, the non-whites and the blacks. I don't care. I think that's a regular interracial relationship. But a relationship between a black person or a non-white and a white, that's considered a tragic arrangement, which is the 3 T's: trashy, tacky, or terroristic.
Yeah, I wanted to say like I was kind of witnessing this yesterday. I went to a party with a white man who is married to a Salvadorian, like she's definitely like a indigenous woman. And well, before this, the first time that I met him, because I have a daughter, and I was saying, oh, our daughters should play together. And the first thing he said was, yeah, my daughter is full Salvadorian. We should play together. I raised her, even though she's not my own. And I was like, I don't even think to bring up the race of my child at all. And I think that it's like, there's like this, there's also this thing he did yesterday at a party where he basically like was sexualizing this black woman's child who was like 20 something, but this man is like in his 40s, and was basically like going on and on about how this black man was the sexiest man he had ever witnessed in his life, and how he's constantly walking around with his shirt off, and how insecure he feels around this incredibly sexy black man. And it was making me so uncomfortable. And I think it was like a part of like the tacky, like trashy part that Swa was talking about, where even if there's no kind of like malicious intent, there's still this very strange like fetishization and almost like using people of color to like make you feel like you're not white, but you are white. But like, yeah, and I think that that was what he was doing, and it was just a really strange experience. But like reading this book helped me to understand it better, I think.
He also had like a ton of tattoos, and white people covered in tattoos are white people who long for that color, long for that melanin, consciously or subconsciously. So, you know, decode what we see, process it, and share it.
This also, can I swing back to what I was gonna mention like before? Now that I know that Moni is a like licensed law professional with this whole thing that I keep hearing about in the States about changing your status, like correcting your status as a Black person in America. What is you guys' stance on that whole thing?
Well, to me, white people have white privilege and in person, and some people are able to apply to jobs and grants and stuff, and by changing their race to Black, they perceive themselves as having the advantage because they believe that affirmative action has put Black people in a position of power, when affirmative action simply gave rights to everyone, and everyone benefited from the action, including white people, including brown people, including red people. You see that a lot in the media, but that's just, these are distractions. These are not things.
Can you clarify? I didn't understand the question.
Right. I should have prepared the question a bit better, but it's like
she's asking about the people who like the Rachel Delzozas and the people who are getting found out for pretending to be black. Yeah.
Oh, Trayshawn, I was talking about black people changing their correcting their from
so on a
being black.
document, you're right, because there's a category of racial identification and you could check the boxes. And now in California, maybe in other states, you could check multiple boxes, or you could check Black/Caribbean, Black/African. There's, I think, a sense of identity that people are trying to become more aware of, and some are definitely trying to take advantage of it. But there also, I think, was a thinking at some point, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, that people would start to self-identify. So anybody looks at my son, they'll identify him as black. The cop that beat him up, and the guy to call him the N-word, and the cop that put him up against the car when my son was getting attacked at age 12, identified him as black, of course. He's biracial, he's half white. He doesn't identify as white. He doesn't identify as biracial, he identifies as black. So it's kind of a process now in the United States, as I understand it, to check the box of how you yourself identify for purposes of, they do a lot of identification. What's the data I'm talking about? The data points that they collect around the country for demographics, that's the word I'm looking for. So demographic information to identify our population throughout the country is kind of, I think, what you're going to, how people are checking these boxes. Got it?
Yeah, that's exactly it. Because there are some people who will argue that they, although they're black or melanated, that they are originally from like the Americas, or maybe either they're part of the diaspora, or they're either part of the diaspora that's been displaced from their native land, which could be out of Africa, if that makes sense. So like there are some people in the States who believe that they are Moors, or believe that they are like the Native American people that were here before white people showed up. Does that make sense? So in essence, they do not identify themselves as what the Europeans would call black, because that was a racial identification that was given to the descendants of slaves or something like that, or just to operate in this racist system. That was the identification that was made. But their argument is that all original people on this planet were black, were dark melanated people, so they could argue that, oh, well, I just come from this country anyway, so I am an American. If I'm,
they're probably confused, and that's where the alienation of this book comes in. I'm going to definitely read this book, but that's on a whole nother.
I love what I put in the chat. Confused.
What you're right. Confused. People are confused when they're going that direction. Yeah, they're alienated.
So I had this guy in my inbox on Instagram arguing about how me using the word black was wrong, and that I'm not. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. They're just like, black is so stigmatized that sometimes it's a bad word to some people, unfortunately. I want to comment on what Trey said, because I really don't think we should be using the word privilege when referring to white power. You should say white power, because when Trey said privilege referring to white people, then he said power when referring to black people. Black people don't have no power. So when we say privilege, we're like causing more confusion and deceit surrounding white supremacy, because it's not a privilege to exist in white supremacy. If you're white, it's a power. You have like more power than everybody else by default. So call white privilege what it is, white power, or race and white supremacy. And let's codify this language, codify our behavior into. Trey, can you hear me? Hear that? I hope you hear that. Anyways.
The only concern I have with that is our lexicon of white power for the white supremacists. If they go white power, and all the white fools get together, white power. And so the way in which that is referenced in their minds anyway is backwards. But I understand your argument. I understand.
I say white license, like, because they have a license to kill because they're white. They have a license to, like, commit mass murder, like, or like commit school shootings because they're white. It's not a privilege. I don't want that privilege. Like, I don't want the privilege of like, you know, subordinating people, but they have a license to do it by the state and by white supremacy.
That one's more accurate. I kind of like that. Start spreading that around, Ashley. Sister Ashley got it.
I think that's more confusing. I think that's more confusing. I mean, like, white. If you call white privilege white power, and someone's like, "Well, I'm not that kind of racist." Well, you don't have to be that kind of racist to be a racist. Supporting or refining white supremacy in any of the 9 areas makes you a racist or a white supremacist, and that's just, we have to understand it as that. And there's no leeway or a white person trying to slime their way out of that. Most white people, by definition, white supremacy and how it functions, are racist and white supremacists. So unless you know a white person who dedicates themselves 24/7, 7 days a week to fighting racism and white supremacy, then you don't know any white people who are not racist suspects. I just had to say that.
Yeah, I actually wanted to like piggyback off what Ruby had said and give my own understanding. The terms white and black are like statuses as opposed to like racial identity. You'd see on these forms that we have to tick box, it would say Asian, East Asian, North Asian, but when it comes to us, it's like white British, white other, black British, black African, black Caribbean. It's like, and like there was at one point when I was marking this, I got really frustrated and I asked, I was like, where's the West African British version? Like, as in, because that word was playing on my head, as in, do I accept the term black? Because I think part of the Moorish, the understanding of taking on your status as being Moorish in America subjects you to different laws. Correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that it may subject you to different laws and you don't get treated or in legalized terms as a black citizen. You then have the native or Aboriginal status, and the laws that you have are different, and you have access to more things in the American law. Am I right to say that? But that's just my understanding of wanting to get away from the terminology black, it being derogatory and claiming that you're Moorish or Aboriginal as a way of like protecting yourself legally.
I'm not too sure, and I'm not too sure how that would even operate under a white supremacist system, to be honest, because it's true. It's so deep that even saying that you're native to the land, it doesn't matter.
You have to super prove it.
But even if you did, it's like, I don't know. We're here now. White people are here now.
Because have you heard of the term the $5 Indian? They mentioned this in Hidden Colors too, where European people can actually buy the status of being a native, so they have access to land, or claim that they're part Cherokee. So I feel like if they can buy status, we should be able, or black African Americans should be able to prove that they are of Native American heritage.
Yeah, just to give more context to what Mary was saying, like during the distribution of reparations towards Native American, white people would pay the administrators $5 to declassify it as Native American so they could get land and other entitlements that were like rationed for Native red-skinned people. So yeah, nothing's changed, y'all. You know.
Yeah.
Thank you for bringing
In
that
the United States, everybody should know about the reparations bill. It's still active in Congress in this current administration. It's going nowhere, but who knows? So there are arguments for Black people to get what was promised here in the US. But you had asked a question about British law, I don't know, but in the United States, there's what's called protected classes for discrimination law. I did that in employment cases. So if someone is discriminated on the basis of race, gender, age, disability status, they can have a cause of action in court for discrimination, but you have to show that you're a part of what's called a suspect class, which is interesting, the language of the law. So a discrete insular minority are in 5 categories in the United States. So that's when classification, quote unquote, comes into play as far as protected under federal and state law. And states vary by state, but the federal law is protective in those areas. from unemployment, housing, and credit now after 1964 and 68 Civil Rights Acts.
That's good stuff. Put that down, Moni. Hey, thank you, Ruby, for bringing that topic up. You know, there's a growing movement in this country called the ADOS movement, which is focused on reparations. And it's very controversial. This is a deep, controversial subject that we're dealing with, you know, because the ADOS movement, can you hear me? Can everybody hear me? The ADOS movement is the American Descendants of Slaves. And so on the one hand, we have our indigenous heritage that we're becoming aware of, and which would question whether you're an ADOS if you're an indigenous person, because there were thousands, mute yourself, Moni. There were thousands of Black people in this country that were never slaves. They were in maroon societies in these swamps in Louisiana and in Florida, where at night they would raid the slave plantations and kill white people and bring the sustenance back to the village. You know, the Gullas in South Carolina, anywhere where there were deep swamps, you had societies of Native Americans and indigenous people and the African escaped slaves living together. And some of those people that were born and escaped, there were thousands of Black people in this country that were never slaves. So there's a controversy really right now because, like, for example, our aspiring vice president, our past president, these are not ADOSs. These are not American descendants of slaves. So, you know, the controversy is, and I know this might be off topic a little bit, they are not entitled to reparations. It's only those that can establish American descendants, that they are American descendants. And so what we're one of the first, not only, but one of the first things that we're demanding is the tax exempt status that indigenous people have. And so what I have, and I got to talk to Moni about this, is that, you know, hey, for one thing, one of the simple solutions to at least approaching reparations for us is 20 years tax exempt status for all ADOS. And I think all Black people, all ADOSs in this country, we need to get together. And now we love our Caribbean brothers and sisters. We're on board with getting your reparations from UK or from France. You know, Haiti has to get $90 million from France. All the Caribbean islands are talking about reparations from UK. And so they're really shaking in their boots because you got a lot of white people that are on board with reparations. And so I know that's slightly off topic, but being the son of a, give me some, what are you eating, Moni? Being the son of a Quaker, my great grandparents were Quakers, and they had an underground railroad station on their property in Indiana. And my grandfather was German, pure German, was a fire and brimstone Northern Baptist John Brown preacher who believed that slavery was an abomination of the devil. But at the same time, that did not make those Quakers, you know, I think at best, all people, starting with white people, feel superior. At best. At worst, they hate us. And so when you say all, like, I I think it was Malcolm X, who said all white people have a little KKK in them, but most white people have a lot of KKK in them. And I think that's true. Even my own mother, unbeknownst to her, and all of her fights against white supremacy, and actually, you know, my father took out a whole generation of white folks. My mother's sisters all had black husbands, so there are no more white folks in my family.
White genetic annihilation right there.
So trashy, tacky, and what was the other one, Swag? Trashy, tacky?
Terroristic.
Terroristic.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm getting a lot of topics in this one thing. You know, we talked about it in earlier, one of the earlier readings, that either one side looks down. Well, the white supremacist side always dehumanizes, and I think Ash used the example of the Salvadorian person. They always find a way to demean or demand that you aspire to their culture, to their side. And so my father, who's this big old burly, black, articulate, intelligent leader in the community, and I think not only him, but all of even our leaders, even our great, you know, W.B. Du Bois, you know, all of our great leaders were conditioned to teach their children to do anything and everything to be acceptable, to dress a certain way, to you know, our language coding, our, you know, how we code switch. They taught us to code switch. We have to dress like all of these behaviors and thought processes must be acceptable to the white man. We can't do anything. We can't dress us away. We can't wear our hair the way. Not we have to, and that would, and my father was vehemently opposed to a black Jesus. Don't be talking to me about no black Jesus. And so even him, and he was a black militant revolutionary, civil rights leader before.
Ben, are you saying he did not? Are you saying he did not believe in Jesus? Or are you saying that he didn't believe that Jesus was a black man? What do you mean by that statement you made?
You know, I never really drilled down and questioned him about it, but I'm going to assume that he believed Jesus was white, and that maybe not. I'm not sure about that, because I think it still gets back to, I don't care if he was black or white. You're gonna behave in a way that is acceptable to the white man.
I think I don't think that's revolutionary. I think those are all tactics that help to maintain and refine white supremacy, which is, you know, just like a lot of things are that. I would say that, you know, like a lot of folks, he was a victim of white supremacy, reacting to racism and white supremacy, probably blindly, not understanding the complexities of racism and white supremacy. Because I've been thinking about code switching a lot recently, actually, and that is a way which further causes confusion and deceit regarding white supremacy, because we hide from the problem, and like by the way we speak, when we shouldn't have to mold ourselves or do anything we don't want to because of the system. But because of the system, this is what the whites have given us, and they like it when we code switch. Because it confirms to like their feelings and to their expectations. You know, when we code switch, we're saying that, okay, I'm gonna, like, you know, we're gonna perform for you. It's performing, you know, it's performative, and I see performative behavior as another way of maintaining and refining white supremacy, because you're not being truthful in your actions and your behavior. So I think we should get to, despite no one reading that much, I think we should still talk about the unified field theory, which is basically how we can understand, if you understand racial white supremacy, we'll be able to place most occurrences, our scenarios, our experiences into this unified field theory, which is the theory that everything is interrelated and in some way, shape, or form a manifestation of racism and white supremacy. But yeah, I don't know if we should get into it too much, because I don't know how many people read the chapter 3. But this graph, let me see if it'll, hold on, it's gonna focus, hopefully. You guys see this graph? You guys see, it's on page 23.
Yeah, we can see it.
All right, do you see how at the separated dots, everything is separated and spread apart? And how at the bottom, they all connect to one line? You guys see that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so basically what this represents is like these dots are different like experiences and whatnot, but as we get a greater like understanding of the world we live in, we're able to like trace the experiences down to one singular like root, which is what this graph is representing. They're all these things are connected, and what they're connected to is racism and white supremacy. And once we're able to decode our reality, we're going to see that everything is connected to racism and white supremacy. That's how dominating this force is. So, you know, poverty, climate change, all abuse, because all blacks kill blacks because the whites have never trained the blacks how to kill whites, you know. But that's why we have black on black crime. We don't make guns, we don't make drugs, we don't know how. We never trained how to do that, but we're trained how to sell them, you know. So all these things are, which don't seem related, if we decode and trace it to its root, they're all connected. So this is how you understand this graph.
Well, thanks for getting to that chapter 3. Before we continue chapter 3, I do think it's important to understand the 3 behavior patterns that Dr. Francis Cress Welsing was focusing on in chapter 2, which was, we talked about alienation, which is like being separated and isolated from oneself. There's also 2 more, anxiety and narcissism. And all of these things are conscious or subconscious manifestations of how white people behave and how they think. And they all are major factors on sustaining racism, white supremacy. Yeah, I just want to please do read chapter 2 in its entirety, so you understand the behavior patterns that are associated with racism, white supremacy, so you're able to better understand what's happening to the person you're talking to, if they happen to be a white person, so you can understand the projections that you're being projected onto, and understand just what's going on. Like, we should all be aware of what's going on, especially during dialogue and having conversations with people, so we could remain safe and not be harmed.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to what you were saying about the 3 main topics brought up in chapter 2 of alienation, anxiety, and narcissism. In every layer of even its description, we definitely see how white supremacy is tied to it. I wanted to share my screen again and just have a look over the diagnostic definitions of narcissism. And I just wanted to like, let's just cross-analyze how it highly relates to like a lot, let's say the reactions that we see in social media to like what a Karen is described as. All of these behaviors exhibit the very violent ways in which that we are maltreated in society. Like if lack of attention can cause someone like, I'm going to give the description of a Karen to call the police because they don't feel like they're being validated in a room, or just create some kind of forced aggressive understanding what white supremacy is, and understanding that the way that they can get at somebody who of Black origin, like calling the police up for a cookout because they feel alienated that they're not invited to the party or something, or people having fun other than their own existence, and just not being able to fathom that, like because it even makes me think the mechanisms that it would take for somebody to want to call the police on a little girl because she doesn't have a license for lemonade, like not seeing the child as a child anymore and actually just seeing them as a product of their hate and having to deal with it in some way. So I don't know if everybody can see our screen, like any one of these definitions that pop out to you, can we like give examples of how we see it in society, or how we've seen white supremacy, how that's like, how that has basically affected us based on any one of these being exhibited from, let's say, somebody like a Karen that we encounter.
Yeah,
I think, oh, you can go first.
Yeah, I'm just gonna focus on the first one. I think when we look at the grandiose sense of self-importance or uniqueness, I think I think Donald Trump thinks he's very important, and he thinks he's a unique person, and I think he's the perfect example of like what a narcissist looks like. Like I do think he's entitled. He has a high level of entitlement. He lacks empathy, and he's unable to recognize how people feel, and he's very exploitative, and he definitely takes advantage of the white Americans who are actually so brainwashed that they conform to his belief patterns, and they conform to what he's saying, and they actually go out and act out on the things that he's saying. So they're not just talking about his rhetoric; they're practicing his rhetoric, and his rhetoric, to be frank, is that rhetoric of racism, white supremacy. He is a racist white supremacist, for sure.
Definitely.
I think D responds to criticism and difference of others or defeat with either cool indifference or with marked feelings of rage, inferiority, shame, humiliation, or emptiness. I feel like last night when Ash, she didn't call this white man a white supremacist. She just said white supremacy, and he just got so defensive, like out of like. So he was like, oh, "Come on, man, my whole body is reparations." What that meant, I have no clue. But yeah, that it's just like that is a constant pattern of narcissism and a pattern of behavior I see in white people. Entitlement for sure. White people feeling entitled to like whole sidewalks. White people feeling entitled to attention. Like when me and Ash go out, they'll like try to talk to us and expect us to like want to talk back to them, or like they'll make a comment expecting Ash to respond. But yeah,
Yeah, I wanted to say the grandiose sense of self-importance or uniqueness. Because white people always think that they were the ones who invented everything, all math, all science, every piece of technology. And they always like make maps to make America and Europe look bigger because they literally think that they're just more of them and they're bigger and they're somehow more unique and better. So I like right when I saw A, that's like the first thing I thought about is how in history books we learn only about white people. And yeah.
And whenever we learn about non-white people, they're always the other, they're the savages, they're the barbarians, they're the people with undeveloped technology. This is all by design. There's a reason why when you go through K through 12 education programming in America, there's a reason why you hate yourself at the end of it. There's a reason why you feel inferior. And even in the books that they make us read, like Huckleberry Finn and Moby Dick, these films are pieces of racist white supremacist propaganda, and they having just by reading these books in white classrooms and having these white students say nigger through the books definitely has an extreme effect on people. I know when I was going to school at Palisades and Paul Revere, like whenever I would read the books ahead of time, and whenever the N word would show up, I'll make sure to like be in the bathroom. So I already knew that the teacher was gonna have some white person reading this book. I already knew you were gonna say the N word. So I would leave the classroom and go to the bathroom just to avoid the terrorist attacks. You know.
Pretty horrible.
Okay, I have one quick one on the probably a little bit of A and D, but I don't know if you all know in London that there's a law in California called the Karen Act. I don't know what the C stands for, but they spell it CAREN, to stop weaponizing white power, white privilege, white entitlement, the license to call on somebody because they're in an area they don't think folks belong, like Oakland. So people get called on so often by gentrifiers that come in and think folks don't belong in their own neighborhood because they've been there a long time. But someone had moved in my apartment building, and she had dropped her keys outside her stairwell. So I was ringing on her doorbell. She looks through the little peephole and starts yelling at me, get back away from my door. I'm like, what is wrong with you? She's like, I'm gonna call the police if you don't get back away from my door. I'm like, what are you tripping on? This is a young white girl who's probably a sophomore at UC Berkeley. So I write a note under her door saying I've lived there 6 years, blah, blah, blah. And I don't know what's wrong with you, but I had no harm to you by ringing your doorbell. And then she comes up defensive. That section about defensiveness and shame and humiliation kicks in because she said, well, why didn't you say so? I was like, you didn't give me a minute to say anything. You kept yelling at me, you're gonna call the police for no reason. So yeah, that is a thing, a real thing. It's gotta stop because it harms us. And that's good. I like what you said, Trey, about getting ourselves fully equipped to prepare for all of this so we don't get harmed either emotionally or physically. Because had she called the cops, of course, then the cops think I've done something.
Yeah, I mean, in the future, I think it's very dangerous to approach white homes and white places of residence.
Right? Yeah, you end up dead.
So many stories of black women and black men being murdered just by seeking help or seeking some type of physical interaction with a white person. So in the future, refrain from going to white people's houses unless you have a reason to be there, unless you are 100% sure that you're going to be safe there. I'm so happy that nothing happened to you, Moni, and I'm sorry you get to experience such a disgusting racist attack. And yeah, just know it's not a reflection of you, it's a reflection of society and the reflection of the mindsets that people have conjured up in their tiny little heads.
Thank you.
Like adding to what Ash said about the environmental grandiose sense of self-importance by making Europe look and like other parts look huge and Africa look tiny on a map. Even like the Windrush, there was almost, because most of the Caribbean was part of the Commonwealth and they were ran by the Queen of England, there was almost this idea that coming to the UK was like the streets were paved with gold. I don't know. There's like a weird kind of the UK is the best mindset, to the point where there's so much trauma from people in the Caribbean who came here and actually got here and touched down and realized, oh, like we're kind of fucked. That is like, but this idea of, you know, coming to the West to better your life, I feel like kind of fits in to that grandiose self of importance or uniqueness, which it is superficial. Like there's nothing there. It's not anything.
Okay, let me chime in. Number 3, E3, interpersonal exploitiveness takes advantage of others to indulge in his own desires or for self-aggrandizement with disregard for the personal integrity and rights of others. So what has happened as you have a people that have created this superego, which is narcissism, to cover up and to hide their low self-esteem. And that they're the inventors of superego and low self-esteem. One typically doesn't exist without the other. That's the reason one creates this superego, is to cover up and hide their deficiencies. And so it gets back to the whole gaslighting. And an example is how they go all over the world. And in particular, right now, my focus right now is how all of these distractions that are taking place to distract us from the invasion of Venezuela, which is just one act of racist aggression on people of color in a long litany. It's the most recent act of aggression to totally disregard the democratically elected leader of a country because they will not allow you to exploit their resources, and to systematically send black operatives, goons, we call them, special forces people, to topple governments and totally, annihilate millions of people. Yemen, Syria. But I like to focus more on our own continent with the attack and just total annihilation of the peoples of South America, and then cage them in an attempt to escape the devastation that we perpetrated on them. And so that's like the ultimate example of that number 3 right there. There was a genocide. Tasmania is an island near Australia.
Yep, they're all dead.
They committed genocide, killed every native on that island so that they can take over that land. So that's the example that I thought.
Thank you so much for that. And just to add to the Tasmanian island, we had a TV show growing up in the UK. It was called The Tasmanian Devil. And it's almost like an inner joke. It's a personal joke, because I'm only growing up now and learning this information that it was completely wiped out and genocide, and everybody, every Aboriginal person on that island was massacred and killed by way of choice. They made a cartoon where there's a Tasmanian devil that anything in his path he destroys. Like, he was very uncontrollable, but
unintelligent, can't speak.
Yes, yeah, just like that's literally was his language, and just screamed and then ran around destroying everything in his path. And to understand that that's something they actually did, and then have a cartoon that conditions kids to learn about the Tasmanian island, but in a way to say that the people who were originally there were primitive, and the European people, the explorers like Indiana Jones style, who have gone there, have now befriended the Tasmanian devil and made him this pet, and they have this relationship. Understanding that just it's another form of their narcissism, and not confronting their evil acts, and can slowly condition it and desensitize it in a way to look at it as by way of nature, of natural conquering over land, and survival of the fittest. And just to also add to what you said, I also was drawn to number 3, the interpersonal exploitativeness. And I wanted to say, like, another example of how it's manifested itself in modern society is through the tokenism aspect of, as long as you have one Black person in your organization or industry, you can actually apply for funding to say that you're supporting someone from BAME. So often people are just tick boxes, and then the cultural effects of white supremacy in that workplace usually work against that Black person, and they end up wanting to leave within the year. But they've still benefited from it, because they've created this affirmative actions / tick box where they can now get funding if they do anything that relates to the BAME, Black or anybody of ethnic minority.
I wanted to say something about number 3. interpersonal exploitiveness. I recently learned that like so you know how there's a talk about a lot of Black trans people who have been dying, or Black gay people who are homeless. And I recently learned that a lot of white gay organizations use those talking points to set up these really expensive like galas where they get a lot of money.
Yeah.
And then the money doesn't go to any of those Black people. It literally just goes to the white gay people in those organizations to further whatever causes they want, which is usually just like giving them more money and more access to privilege, or yeah. And so I just like that was what I thought about. I mean, it happens in a lot of different places, but yeah, it's pretty common in a lot of types of organizations.
Can I share one last thing I forgot when Trey was talking about our miseducation of our people? When in the 60s, Ben might remember this, my parents sent us on Saturday school. So on Saturdays, we learned Swahili, we learned our Black history, we learned information they don't have in the school books, we learned the real history of America. But that was a private undertaking by my dad's chapter of the NAACP and a social group, the Brothers of Masonic Lodge. And anyway, there's a lot of that consciousness back in the 60s, early 70s, and it kind of got lost. So I think one of the solutions I love about this group is when we break it down, deconstruct, maybe we can reconstruct and bring things like that back, more like the Black Panther Party did and others put together to reawaken our real selves.
I agree. I think that's totally accurate. Now, does anyone want to comment on anxiety, alienation, or narcissism before we move on to unified theory?
I can make a quick comment. In terms of that being a diagnostic and us being able to read from each of its subheadings and understand that it's embedded so much in white European society, I was thinking, as a question, is it possible that we could get some kind of law or policy or act that can diagnose it as a mental disorder to be a supremacist, a white supremacist? What do you think of the possibilities of that happening if we go about this the right way and try and hand in hand show the diagnostics that they have in the BDSM accredited psychological the psychological handbook, along with the behaviors that we're seeing in society, along with the murders that we're witnessing where somebody can be on someone's neck for 8 minutes? Do you have a mental health disorder, or can we classify it as such for our own protection? What do you think?
I mean, I believe that like many psychiatrists have already classified racism as a disease / mental disorder. I don't have those sources or like facts with me at the moment, but I believe that it's hard for me to call it a disease. I understand why that would be the rationale and the logic behind calling it a disease. But for me, if your whole culture is rooted in racism, white supremacy, and I don't really think you have a choice to decide if you're going to participate or not. You're participating in group whether you want to or not. So yeah.
Yeah, like I don't see the law like helping so much and to replace white supremacy with justice. Yeah, and the white people, they control like the field of psychology, so they dictate what's sane and what's not sane. And if you truly look at this society, this is a highly functioning insane society. Like Black people have had to be made insane to tolerate this oppression that we tolerate on a everyday basis collectively. So this is a functioning insane society, but Black people aren't even allowed to like experience so-called mental health issues. When we do, we're murdered or like diagnosed with like super intense mental disorders. Like, so yeah, I think it's really important to understand that aspect of racism, white supremacy.
I think there's hope. I think there's hope for getting legislation passed of the insanity of because white supremacy, for example, the monuments dedicated to the Confederates symbolize, and it's not being emphasized enough, that what white supremacy symbolizes is murder, plain and simple. And we sit by. I mean, and really any act of one human being taking the life of another human being, other than real self-defense, is insanity. It's self-destruction. What I do to you, I do to me. If you know, Mike, I have to live with the consequences, the spiritual and emotional and psychological damage that I have placed on myself by committing murder on another person. And we have to keep in mind that just like the sheepdog, that you don't have to train. If you get a good pedigree sheepdog and put it out in the field with the rest of the grown trained sheepdogs, you don't have to train it. It's going to automatically, by pedigree and by breeding, going to herd the sheep. Same with race horses. Horses run in the wild to compete to see who's going to lead the herd. So they train the horses, but they promote the natural intrinsic instinct of the horse to compete. And we tend to forget or not acknowledge that our ancestors were bred and they knew the pedigree, by the way. They know us. They knew the pedigree of the slaves that they were breeding. Just imagine having a farm like dogs or horses. There's farms in Virginia for the sole purpose of breeding people. And when those babies popped out, all they saw was what that master showed them. That's the only thing they know. And so to be so what am I trying to say? To be so distorted, to have your view of yourself so distorted is perpetrating insanity on a person. To strip them, to strip a person, to cut your tongue out for speaking your own language or a language that they couldn't understand that you could communicate with. Cut your tongue out for learning to read and learn about your culture. Completely erase your language. We're the only people on the planet that have those three, I mean, I'm talking about ADOSs. We don't even know what country, what tribe, what nationality we are from Africa. Completely stripped. We can guess. Now we can do a DNA search and find that out and try to catch up. Our language stripped. Our culture completely erased. So you have a person without those three capacities, that's an insane person. So, I mean, that could very well go into a lawsuit, and I wouldn't know. It's way too much, way above my pay grade. We'd have to talk to Moni about how to formulate legislation against white supremacy.
Awesome discussions. Can we transgress into the unified theory? Um, I think it'd be a great, because it's the last chapter of our discussion, and there's some great tidbits. That's why I briefly introduced it as the notion that everything is connected, whether you're aware of it or not. I think the last time we talked about this, Ash had a really good definition of unified theory. So, Ash, would you mind sharing that, or your take on what unified theory is?
Oh, just quickly, Ash, sorry to interrupt. I'm just gonna make a dash. Sorry, Trayshawn, I see him busting out. I'm just gonna make, I gotta go off to bed, innit? So I just thought I'd say goodbye properly.
Oh, it's okay. Good night.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, well, on page 48, we could look at this as like, what was I gonna read it? When one examines the microcosm of the individual white personality or the macrocosm of the global white collective, the law of genetic survival stands. That law can be stated in the following equation: white power over non-white powerlessness, which is W over
WP over not over endos. Yeah.
What do you say?
Said W over, it's WP over NWP.
No, it's W over NW. It's just W over NW. Nonetheless, the application of the law for whites is a failure of the individual and collective white self-respect based upon the negative image and concept of the self. So white people literally, in their unified field theory, they have like this literal law of whites over non-whites. You know, that's their subconscious law. In all areas, this is why everything black related is negative, everything white related is fair, benevolent. And on like, and to contrast that, on the basis of a positive self-image and self-concept, the brain computer evolves patterns of neurochemistry, logic, thought, speech, action, emotional response, and perception that are self and group supporting and productive of harmony in the universe. You know, because we have white people have the opposite of that. They have self and group systems that are self-negating and destructive and self-destroying. You know, like they smoke black cigars. Later during the chapter, we're going to talk about that, but the black cigar represents the black male phallic symbol. This is how it's also used in movies. It's also self-negating because it destroys yourself via giving you cancer. The same with tanning. They tan to get color, to feel some kind of power or belonging, but it's self-negating because it destroys by giving you skin cancer. And also, black people participate in a majority of self-negating activities like drugs and non-constructive gatherings and not fighting white supremacy and gang violence. Even it was trained by it was given to us by the whites, but we're still participating in it. We're still participating in it. I'm done. That's it.
Yeah, I want to, so further for us to understand the unified theory, I want to share my screen and show this chart. Mary, can you give me privileges to share my screen? This chart, it's not the simplest chart, but it's something we could all break down by looking at it. So we have the diagram of dynamic factors contributing to the end.
Please zoom in a bit, please.
What is it?
Please zoom in a bit.
So can we just take turns reading this page? So I'll read the title, and then the first one, and then someone can take over. Diagram of dynamic factors contributing to end product of behavior. 1, social system structure, racism, white power over non-white powerlessness.
Intermediate environment, job, income, housing, school, neighborhood, social institutions, etc. Family, grandparents, siblings, other relatives.
Mother-father relationships, mother's personality and maturity, father's personality and maturity.
Genetic and constitutional anxiety.
Self-concept and self-image, positive or negative, which become behavior patterns of logic, thought, speech, action, emotional response, perception in all areas of people activity, economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, religion, sex, and war.
Patterns of psychosocial development, i.e. basic trust versus mistrust, autonomy versus shame, doubt, initiative versus guilt, industry versus inferiority, identity versus role confusion, intimacy versus isolation, generativity versus stagnation, integrity versus despair.
So this diagram shows the correlations between how social systems and our social structure impacts, and basically, I don't want to say control, but influences, like our patterns of psychosocial and psychological development, and our behavior patterns, our self-concept and our self-image, whether positive or negative. And keep in mind, all of this stuff we're seeing is in the context of racism and supremacy. So could someone tell me how the self-image and self-concept of a Black child may develop versus a white child, based off your own understanding of this chart? It doesn't have to be from the book, but just tell me how you think that they would develop under racism as a community.
For me, growing up in Western society, being a Black child, just me witnessing it with my younger niece, she's somebody who was a very bright young girl. We had like various conversations. I would show them images of themselves, and they thought themselves to be quite beautiful. They knew that, you know, the concept of a child knowing they're cute and not getting in trouble because of their like childlike nature. And she had that very bubbly air about her, like cheekily thinking that she can get out of trouble with a smile. So basically knowing that they're beautiful and they're cute. When she started primary school, nursery for the first time, after 2 or 3 weeks, she came back, and one of the things, she came back for the weekend and she had a lower demeanor and basically said she wanted to be white. She wished she had long hair. Why doesn't she have long hair? She asked why she is Black, and I had to now break that down even further as to expressing that she's beautiful, constantly re-showing her images. And I thought what had changed, and the only thing that happened was that she was introduced into school. So she was introduced into that psychological playground of seeing favoritism, seeing certain children being treated better than herself. And that as soon as you get into like a white environment, or you watch TV, like I grew up thinking that red lipstick wasn't for Black women because it was associated with white women, or it wouldn't look good on me, or my big lips, like this, all these connotations. It's like what the European experiences naturally, based on the fact of them realizing their position in nature and adjusting to this, where I believe like we're forced to experience it ourselves in some way, of feeling alienated, feeling like we are the ones, we are unattractive, and having to do all this unpacking and learning just to actually love ourselves later on down the line when we observe ourselves in nature. But in the school environment, it's sheltered, so you experience the opposite. Yeah.
Yeah, I actually had the same exact experience with my daughter. Like most of the schools she went to were Black schools until she got into this like school in Torrance. And literally like a week later, she kept asking me to put her hair in a ponytail because she would just wear it out because all the kids would talk about how weird her hair was. And like we had to unpack that for a while because it was so random and I didn't even expect it to happen. But once you're around like white people, like the first thing they do is otherize you. And either they otherize you and tell you, oh, your hair is so beautiful, and constantly talk about it as if it's not just hair, or they like, make you feel like it's ugly.
I want to say, I see, in the isolation categories, I see white males and black males growing up isolated in various ways. But I feel like it benefits the white males because even though if a white male grows up isolated, they can still grow and join like a white supremacist group and like find some camaraderie in that, or like just fall into some kind of other subculture in the entertainment area of people activity. Whereas where like when black people experience isolation, they can turn to like substances or like gangs, and they also are very isolated from like their feelings, which damages a lot of like the relationships amongst black people. So that's what I really touched out to me versus being intimate with themselves and being free within themselves. It's not very common, especially in the lower class of the black person. I feel like the more you're gonna have that these negative turnouts in the self image because your financial situation plays so much into your state of living.
Yep. For me, industry versus inferiority and autonomy versus shame and doubt. I remember like being in kindergarten and like being first introduced to antebellum slavery and just feeling really ashamed to be black and really like ashamed that my ancestors allowed themselves to be enslaved by people who classify themselves as white who are genetically inferior. And I remember just like feeling hopelessness and for a long time I suspected that something was off. I suspected that this whole society was askew, especially being in kindergarten and like being triggered by just seeing a picture of Gandhi. I didn't know much about Gandhi, but I knew when I first saw a picture of him, I knew that he was someone not to be honored and respected. And then I go from learning about Gandhi to learning that I was a slave. So the curriculum definitely didn't make me feel like a part of the American industry or like the American dream. It definitely made me feel inferior, and then like I had no control over my autonomy. It gave me a lot of like shame and doubt in my future self as a person. So yeah, like all of these dynamic factors definitely contributed to my behavior patterns. I was more quiet. I hated school. I was disrespectful to my teachers. That's my experience.
Thanks for sharing.
So the other thing that happens is Black kids get criminalized, girls particularly, and there's some studies about that one of my mentees was working on. Shelby has that work. But it's sad also to this day, which my son in Seattle, if he was ever tired, there's some presumption, right, that you're on drugs, or no, he might just be tired because he studied all night, or he wrote these long scripts when he was in the 4th and 5th grade. So I think he was also under that A1 line where it talks about social structure and society that casts Black children in a certain way that were labeled in such a way that's negative, that the study from the psychology experiment with dolls, you guys are familiar with those black and white dolls?
Yeah.
So that was such, I guess, persuasive evidence that it was the exhibit that essentially passed Brown versus Board of Education to integrate schools, because by separating, by isolating, then it was making Black youth as inferior, and not having any positive self-image, which my parents grew up in Jim Crow South in Alabama and Mississippi. You know, they attended segregated schools, segregated swimming pool. They didn't have a swimming pool. They couldn't go to the rec center. They couldn't go to restaurants. They couldn't go to theaters, except the peanut gallery up in the back area, if at all. So that isolation and separation is definitely a way of white supremacy taking advantage and creating a false narrative, but also an abuse of power, of course. So that's my share.
Hey, this is some cutting edge, even though it's been in circulation for years. This is
Yeah,
this is potent, right?
I would call this a holy text for sure. This is one of our holy texts. There's so much valuable knowledge in here that still to this day is so pregnant.
Yeah. You know, how it affects relationships. That's what came up for me. How it affects relationships between Black men and Black women compared to white men and white women. And the difference between how this diagram affects white children and Black children, and how it points out how it distinguishes between the ability for one to trust and mistrust. In my class, sometimes I substitute and I have women groups as well, my domestic violence classes. And I had a group a few months back of females. There was about 12 females in the group, and 100% of them had the issue of trust is the reason that they were in that group. And it obviously stems back to self-image, concept, and the deeply embedded guilt and shame and doubt. And I'm looking at this, and it's great because on the one side you have autonomy, which is freedom, which is ability to move freely and think freely as an individual. And on the other side you have shame and doubt. I never connected those two, but that's really profound. And how the inferiority complex is required, and for everyone else to have an inferiority complex, and for the white supremacists.
Yeah.
and because I feel inferior, and I know I'm inferior, I have to make every effort to not only cover it up and to pretend I'm superior, but to make every effort in possible to convince you, not to make you inferior, but to convince you that you're inferior. I mean, how can a little country like Britain dominate the entire globe? That little dot. They have no resources. They don't. Africa feeds Europe. They get all their food from Africa. All of the resources that we need for civilization is there in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And I'm talking about what we use for computers and phones, the cobalt, the coltan, you know, not to mention the plutonium, well, the uranium that they use for plutonium for nuclear war to back your supremacy. You know, not to mention the oil, the rubber, the gold, everything that we need. And they were so good and so tactic. It was in Walter Rodney's How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, how they systematically were able to completely, just by, they showed up with red uniforms, with gold buttons, and nothing of substance but a Bible. and it was able, had been able to acquiesce the entire continent and all of their resources in exchange for nothing, but a psychological
prison
game switch that they made you believe that you're civilized, that they're civilized and you're not, and convince you to want what they have instead of take and build and keep, and it's in every, and I could go out on a limb and say every African dictator of every African country is totally corrupt, totally sold out, totally brainwashed, totally convinced that everything good is in Europe and everything corrupt and useless, and will not build a hospital. They'll go for their medical care in Europe, the people that can afford it. And some of the smartest people on the planet have the highest IQs are those Igbos of Nigeria, those Zimbabweans are geniuses when it comes to agriculture. You have the highest brain power on the planet in Africa with all the resources, and those corrupt dictators hoard all the money and give it right to Europe.
Can I make a current day analogy of the prosecutor Daniel Cameron, who Tamika Mallory said some skin folk aren't kinfolk, and that just like the slave traders, he's traded Breonna Taylor and her family into an unjust result by basically presenting the oppressor, that white supremacist model from Trump, McConnell, all of them. And he's their tool, but he's a willing tool. So shame on him, and he's hopefully not going to get reelected and maybe get ousted. But it's really shameful and sad that in that, I like your diagram, a lot of areas that it speaks to what's happening now, what's happening in the past, what we have to deconstruct and reevaluate, because it's got to go. But the whole justice system in large part is, as somebody says, it wasn't designed to be just for us, but other than white people. It's another tool of white supremacy, is the definition that was given by Trey in the beginning. You know, the laws, the war, all the different categories, education, etc. Okay, I'm about to run out of battery again, so sorry if I disappear, but I'm plugged in again. So that's just a thought.
Yeah, law is one of those major areas where we're dominated by white supremacy. So surely there's under the system of white supremacy, we're all forced to be criminals and we're all guilty for participating in white supremacy. So the compensatory code, I can't wait till we get to that book, because it's gonna be so awesome to really be like codify ourselves and I understand like how these systems are just so corrupt.
I want to pose a question to the group. Okay, so we are living in a system of racism and white supremacy, right? So is the strongest power structure in the known universe racism, white supremacy, or is it love?
Love. Love.
Mommy says
Didn't
love.
Prince say it? What did Prince say? Wait, what did Prophet Prince say? Something like, love is what makes the world. There's a quote by Prince that's about that.
One for love. All right, can everyone?
I'm gonna say white supremacy is the strongest force.
We have one for white supremacy. I'm also gonna say white supremacy. Mary, Ben.
Wait, can I clarify your question, sir? Can I clarify your question? Just a second. I want to see what you're asking, though. Are you saying what's the most powerful?
So we live in a world where everything is energy. Like even money is energy. And I want to know if it is the most powerful energy source in a known universe, love or racism and supremacy. I along with SWA, have already chosen white supremacy as the strongest energy force in the known universe. And
I have to say,
I'll justify my rationale after everyone has decided, and I can do a tally. So Moni, you for love. Who's for it? Can everyone answer this question?
love.
All right, so Mary's for love as well.
Tell you right too. Even the aspects of white supremacy, it's an obsession, love and hate. There's a thin line, isn't there?
All right, I'll take that. Ben, Ash.
Love conquers all, baby.
Okay, awesome.
Ash?
Unfortunately, I have to say white supremacy. I really don't want to, but I just don't. Yeah, I'm sorry.
and Saliha.
Celia?
Yeah, Celia.
Celia?
Right now it's even. It's 3-3. You know.
I will
Tiebreaker.
have to say love for sure. Sorry. Love.
Okay. All right. Okay. So what you guys are saying, I just want to remind you guys all that you guys are all victims of racism. And we don't live in a loving society. We live in a society where white people, or people who classify themselves as white, have subjugated you, yourself, families, your friends. And everyone in the world knows about white people. Everyone in the world practices white supremacy, either knowingly or unknowingly. I'm not saying this stuff to be hard. I'm saying this so we are on the same page. Love does not conquer all, because Europeans have done it already. Europeans conquered it. So, like, I'm
not do that.
I'm being very honest.
Wait, is this Trey or SWA talking? I know your voice is usually different. That's what I thought you was Trey. Okay, I had to slide my screen over to see who's talking. Of course, that's Trey. Trey, brother, continue. We must argue our points. Keep going.
I'm going based off the text, and what I'm saying is it's true. Love has never stopped a white person from killing a black person. It's never happened, you know. But it does encourage people to protest and say a slogan, you know. But
yeah, I'm gonna throw more oil, more gasoline on this fire, because I feel, due to this whole love propaganda that Martin Luther King was unfortunately like bamboozled into perpetuating, because no rational person should be okay with getting brutalized, and should rationalize loving your enemy and saying we shall overcome in the process of letting your enemy brutalize you. So I feel that Martin Luther King was a huge FBI plot to convince the black collective to, if they are gonna fight white supremacy, do it in a way that no whites are gonna be harmed via non-violence. Because I guarantee, if all those black people during the civil rights era were, instead of letting the whites destroy them, instead of destroying the whites, or creating the same atrocities that the whites were creating. So how about when that church was bombed? Okay, we're gonna go out and bomb a white church now, because okay, they lynched 2 blacks, we're gonna go out and lynch a white, castrate them too. Instead of fighting fire with fire, fighting the same energy with the same energy, MLK convinced the large majority to fight fire with love. So so that's my 2 cents. Yeah, and that's my 2 cents.
I also want to add on to that. When you guys read the unified theory, the unified theory is a collective energy, and love is not a collective energy at the moment. Love has been disconnected. Racism, white supremacy is a collective energy. It's practiced by a global population. It's practiced by a local population. So until we are able to articulate ourselves honestly and be honest with our, thoughts and hearts, Of course, love is a powerful aspect of a society, but it's not the dominating aspect of the universe. If it was, we wouldn't be having a conversation right now. We are talking about racism and supremacy. Benjamin and Moni, your ancestors were talking about the exact same thing. So love has not alleviated any of this trauma or this genocide. And to me, you can't have love and genocide in the same society. It doesn't make any sense. It's insanity, actually. Yeah. And I'm seeing some awkward faces, primarily from Ash. We can talk about it, but you guys are aware of the system we are living in. We will be able to combat it in the necessary way. I'm not trying to be a party pooper here. I'm being someone who's informed.
First of all, I want to say that I definitely agree with a lot of that's been said about white supremacy being a very dominating force. And even the understanding of what we think love is has definitely a white supremacist cloak over it. And just looking at the Bible in terms of like the compassion of Christ, like that's all been tools to soften us and our reaction to like turn the other cheek, love thy neighbor, all these aspects that we've indoctrinated into ourselves to be like submissive towards maltreatment. But the second that because the English is bastardized the meaning of love. We think love is as simple as somebody who you sleep with and your offspring and your love for obsession for food. Like there's universal love. There's loving somebody from a distance. There's humming to your child who's dead and bringing them back to life, and that is the energy of love. And I think that is definitely the terminology of love makes the world go round. It's an energetic force. Like I'm gonna digress and go to, okay, has everybody watched Monsters Inc. and how laughter was used to energize electricity more than fear was? That there's a certain frequency that you hit when you go past love that gives you access to, I think, more spiritual aspects of yourself, and in self-respect and loving yourself, you can still use that to negate through white supremacy. And if you love yourself or understand what that means, you will stand up to white supremacy. So I don't think that one is more dominant than the other. I think it's because of love we are at this stage where we are taking it upon ourselves to learn and arm ourselves with the tools to battle white supremacy. That's love to me.
Can I chime in?
Yeah.
Just briefly, this is a short run for the white supremacists. They're desperate. They were desperate from the gate, right? 250 years of supremacy, basically, right?
I would say 500 or so.
Yeah, it's about 500.
But none of it compares to the 20,000 years of development and establishment of civilization in Kemet. So we're talking a minuscule fraction of power that they've been able to maintain for this short period of time. And as was mentioned in the book, the occupation of the Iberian Peninsula, of Portugal and Spain, of those black Moors that brought mathematics, science, education, civilization as a whole to those people. So they occupied that place for 700 years. And so I'm gonna go out on a limb and assume that when they brought when you bring civilization to a person, that's a gift. That's a gift of love. When you bring education and civilization and take them by the hand and teach them that they can't sleep with the animals, animal husbandry, it's going to cause diseases. That's a gift of love that those black people brought those albinos, right? And so I'm a Malcolm X follower. I'm not a Martin Luther King follower. I'm a revolutionary. I believe in arming myself, and I'm ready. I'm going to be ready. I'm ready now. I got a Glock with 1,000 rounds, and I got a shotty with buckshot, and I got a 38. I got a Saturday Night Special. right? I'm ready, and my boys, I got boys, man. I'm going to their house when it pops off, because they got AKs, Uzis, all kind of artillery, and these are revolutionaries. These aren't gangsters, right? But you know, there's gangsters with artillery too that can be enlightened. We got to enlighten these guys.
Yeah, very necessary.
Well, Malcolm X's juxtaposition to MLK was, we have to love each other. If we get together and unite and love each other first, and it's really, I think what we're doing right now is what happened when Alexander the Great was a mendicant. He was a messenger boy for the pharaohs. He was just a messenger boy, a mendicant. And because they were at the bottom of the economic status, they got together, the white folks got together just like we're getting together now, and planned and organized and schemed a way for them to get together and overthrow. And how were they able to overthrow? Total disregard for integrity, ethics, morality. These are people that were taught and raised, and it's the Oedipus Rex. It is absolutely the Oedipus Rex complex, where it's the classic case of the rebellion of the child against the parents. You know, and so I think that's the only way to overcome white supremacy, is by us loving each other and teaching them how to love. And I think the white people that are conscious, that are trying to be conscious, that are trying to show up. There's a social, you know, there's a socialist organization, I know it's in the Bay Area, where the white people are saying they don't want to enjoy white privilege. They don't even want the material benefits of being white anymore, right? Now, it's my opinion. This is just my humble opinion. I think those people are passing for white. I think they're really black, right? There's a lot of white folks out there that are passing for white that, you know, have a lot of black genes and a lot of black DNA in them. But yeah, so that's my argument for love over white supremacy.
No, it makes sense. I do want to just say, my question was the practice behavioral energy. So love being an energy that's practiced versus white supremacy being energy that's practiced. And I still stand by what I said, and as you guys read chapter 3, you guys may also drift into this way, because you understand that behavior patterns creates an energy field, and the Western world, and just keep in mind, Western just means white, and the Western civilized world, the most practiced energy field is white supremacy, is domination, it's murder, it's pillaging, and it's a lot of negative things. And eventually these things will be dismantled and broken down, but it's gonna take, you know, us reading and us learning, us growing together. And keep in mind, like, racism, white supremacy is literally found in every crevice, every place of the world, and mass media culture everywhere. You cannot escape it. When you are watching TV, you are watching propaganda. When you listen to music, you're listening to propaganda. And when you're reading, you're also reading propaganda. Unless you are reading things where the writer says, I wrote this to end white supremacy, you're probably reading something that's going to sustain it or validate it or encourage it. And this is just a truth of the universe. This is not how it's supposed to be. This is how it is now. You know, we've been conquered as a people, and we need to be aware of that and speak as such.
Yeah. Have y'all seen the movie Patton by any chance? Have you seen Patton? Yeah, that's a good movie. It's a good movie to understand the white supremacist psyche, because
Put the name of it in the chat as well. Oh, one more thing. What Ben said about Martin Luther King. To me, Martin Luther King was a very powerful, influential person. And I do think he was only killed when he started to integrate Black people amongst whites, because integrating Black people amongst white is leading to the possibility of white genetic annihilation, because then you have Black males mixing with white women, and they don't want that. So he wasn't killed for preaching about love. Preaching about love is preaching about being complacent, and being complacent while you're being violated. He was killed when he started talking about integration.
Yeah, I think he was killed because of talking about the finances, talking about how the white people got the white people got reparations after slavery, and how like they were supported and sustained after slavery. And he was about to go like get the money. He was like, actually, it makes no sense that we're integrated if we can't afford to eat at the places we got access to now. So he was about to get on that trail, and it was like, nope. You should have fought back, nigga. Bow. Shot him dead. See, it's why.
They shot him, but he actually was murdered in the hospital.
I wanted to say that I think this is a really good question that Trey's asking, and I think that like in my heart I want to say love, but really I'm like, what really is that tangibly? Like, what is that in terms of like a plan, execution, a strategy? I think it makes everyone kind of just passively think that if you just kind of treat people well or something, or if you even treat yourself well. But if you really have like self-respect under white supremacy, then you're gonna have to like approach it with some sort of like strategical violence, because like that's like what you're countering. And I don't think that that's a negation of love. I think it's more of just like you have love for your people and for the world. And if these people are literally causing a threat to the world to the point where like the world is going to be uninhabitable very, very soon, then like I feel like, you know, it's more than just like love. I don't even know what is meant by love really. So I guess if the people who are saying love, if you could expand on what you mean by that, because to me it doesn't have a tangible like strategy.
Yeah, and before you answer, I just want to say, throughout this conversation, we've been talking about how racism, white supremacy is sustained through behavior patterns, through media, philosophy of white people. What are you saying, Swan?
No, I was just adding on to your thoughts, perceptions.
Thoughts, perception. So to the people who said love, how is love something that is sustained in our culture? Because I see white supremacy being sustained every single day. How is it something that creates tangible solutions and changes? I'm so curious to see how.
So, yeah, I've got a couple examples. Also, what I was trying to show you a bit, my dad met Dr. King, and this is his autograph copy of Why We Can't Wait, when he responded to white people saying that just wait on
Monica, can I say one more thing?
Rights of Black folks.
Keep in context.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were done.
No, it's a keep in context that white supremacy is globals, and so like I would love for this solution to be local and global. I'm done. You want to answer?
Yeah.
So the global movement afoot right now, with climate change being environmental destruction, mainly of us, people in the Amazon when I was in Brazil, is the counterpower, which is self-sustaining, self-supporting, self-reliance, mutual aid, organic gardens. These are tangible examples. Childcare support, building our own knowledge base, building our own skill sets, building our own economic structure, building an alternative model to white supremacy. And I see it happening more and more around the world. In the United States, the Bay Area, there are quite a few groups going right now. There's anti-racism 101. Folks are talking about, I'm not a racist. Well, no, you gotta be anti-racist. You gotta be more conscious and aware, as you're doing in this class about, in this book club about white supremacy and calling it out. But as we call it out, we also have to go back to our own roots to the degree that our community, my generation, the one before it, and 2 or 3 prior to that, was about community, support, reinforcement, encouragement, the compassion of love and support and encouragement counter to hate and division and destruction is more powerful. And I've seen it, and too many examples to go on to, but I don't want to talk about a bunch of stuff and go on and on, but just generally that's the concept. And I've seen it in practice, and I see it building up more now as the planet is literally about to perish because stupid white supremacy is destroying it. And we've got to build a different model. And a lot of folks are looking to Indigenous people in Australia, for example, on how to stop the fires, looking to Native people here, which they should have for a long time, about the medicine, looking to our own griots and our healers and our people that know more than the pharmaceutical companies that are doing nothing but profit to make us sicker and to not build a healthy society or future. So love is tangible to me in many respects, from what we do and how we do it and what our goal is. And if our goal is to survive and we just kill those who kill us and then we kill the others who kill them, and then we have a retaliation back and forth, which is actually happening in part of West Berkeley right now, sadly. There's some beefing going on. And so we want to kill our enemy. Okay, it just doesn't seem to consistently go with the principle of Black solidarity and power.
Where did the rhetoric of killing anyone come into the conversation? You're muted. You muted yourself.
Somebody said something about if the person had gone back and Dr. King had said instead, when they bombed our church, we bombed their church. People bombed his house, by the way, too. And he wasn't weak or feeble like the media likes to present. So I encourage you to read more about Dr. King and all of his writings, because there's some very radical stuff that they don't print very often. So anyway, that's it.
Well, thank you so much for sharing.
Can I say something about?
Well, I just, yeah, I think I want to add to what I said. I think we as Blacks, we've never been, we just don't practice counter war effectively. And understanding white supremacy as war, I think this is something we should think about more, like how to practice counter war. And yeah, yeah, I don't want to call that radical, but that's how much I love the idea of freedom. That I understand the importance of, like, you know, delivering the same blows to the enemy as that are being delivered to us.
So Lil, I want you to say what you want to say, but really quickly. Like, I remember when I first learned about the transatlantic slave trade. Like, in my mind, I kept hearing war, and I started calling it transatlantic war, because I do believe that was the beginning of a worldwide race war against Black people and non-white people. So yeah, I do believe all people who are living underneath the system of racism, white supremacy are prisoners of war, as I said earlier. So Lil, do you want to say what you want to say?
As far as my view on it and how it can be tangible.
It's out. Yes. Does anyone have anything they want to say or share? Does anyone have any questions about the unified field theory? Do you need any more examples? You guys all have to go back and read this anyway.
My question on the unified field theory is, for those of us here who have who was in reading Urugu, I noticed that is this, would you say that this is the Utumawazu, or would you say the Utamaroho of the spiritual life force? Is that the behavioral field of, like, how it's now been encapsulated and shaped into everyday societies and the fabric of everything we do? Is that how I should understand the unified field theory?
I think great question. I do think the unified the unified theory in the context of talking about energy and behavior patterns is a combination of the Asili and the Ultimawazo and the Ultimawazo. I don't think you can separate them. I think it's more primarily the Asili, like the root, the creation of all these things. Spire, you have something to say?
Yeah, the unified field theory is a good example of it's the Otama Rojo. And also because it includes their perception and their thoughts, it's also a part of those two aspects are a part of the Utama Wazo. So,
can someone please just describe what Utamawazo and Utamaroho means for everybody?
I have some.
You can go ahead.
I have to find it. You can go find it.
So we're reading a book called Yurugu, and it's a critique of European culture from an African-centered perspective. And in the book, she uses Swahili to describe how culture forms. And she starts with the word asili, which is supposed to be the germ of a culture. It's similar to like a mythoform. It's the structural seed. And then from the asili comes the utama, or it's not like a linear, but there's other terms. The next term is like the utamaroho, which is the life force. It's like the energy force, the emotional center of a culture. And then the last one is the utamawazo, which is the structure, is a cultural thought. And that one is more intentional, whereas the utamaroho is more something that's subconsciously planted based on the asili of a culture. I hope that made sense.
Yeah, just to add more context for Mary, the asili is the seed, the origin, but once in existence, the Utamaroho is the vitality of the culture. It guarantees its continued life. The asili compels the culture to fulfill itself, but it does so through the form of the Utamawazo and the life of its Utamaroho. The Utamaroho of a people's is a force made powerful through its collectiveness. I hope that gave you like more insight. I think that was like
Definitely, I'll definitely say that Utamaroho is highly linked to the unified field theory. I think it's just a different interpretation of it from the scientific explanation.
What I read was on page I.
Coalition in Berkeley, Community Safety Coalition.
Yeah, okay.
Trying to take,
yes. The book is called Addicted to White. This is where I'm getting the thought of the day into. This is a book I recommend all of us purchasing. And also, this is a workbook as well. Okay, so I'm going to read a thought of the day. And it's just something to think about. You don't have to comment on it. Just think about it. Find one. When in the crucible of love, respect bonds with vulnerability, the molecule of intimacy is synthesized. All right, that's the thought of the day. Anyone have any closing thoughts on the book?
Just right quick. It's burning a hole in my brain that capitalism is dependent on white supremacy. An act of feasible love to overcome this is to work to dismantle capitalism. Dismantling capitalism is an act of dismantling white supremacy. I can go into a lot of examples of how white supremacy is profitable, i.e. one example, the prison industrial complex. So an act of love would be for what all of those things that Moni suggested and more.
The act of love being Oh, to end capitalism. But I see capitalism as a symptom of white supremacy. Like, you know, like many other destructive things we are forced to participate in, I see those as symptoms of white supremacy. You know, I see white supremacy as a root. We wouldn't have capitalism without white supremacy. We could we've seen countries try to make their own money and do their own like currency and be completely destroyed by Western powers, white power, white supremacy. So, you know.
I agree with Ben in that to dismantle white supremacy, I feel like the first step is to really change the means of power, economic power, and who distributes resources and access to resources, because that's one of the like significant life forces of white supremacy, for sure.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Ben's statement. And just to reiterate on, and my conclusion of the unified field theory that Dr. Cress Welsing articulates so well for us, is the fact that because of the unified field theory, because it's so integrated and interweaving into everything we experience, we're not going to call it white supremacy, but capitalism is designed for the sake of white supremacy, understanding that they are the ones, the gatekeepers who are in control of who makes a certain amount of money or who can come in. Although there's upward social mobility where you negate your own culture to basically assimilate into their own, white supremacy has so many levels that in order to go to climb the top of that capitalist ladder, being a white cis male will get you there faster. So by dismantling all the systems that they have around, you were basically breaking into what the unified field theory actually is, where we just collect, without even thinking about it, the policies, the laws that we adhere to are all constructs of white supremacy.
Agreed. Thanks, Bob, for the thought today. I encourage everyone to revisit the text, and for next Sunday to come with
once we understand symbolisms, and especially the symbolism of phallic objects, we're going to be able to see that that little stick he was holding is a phallic symbol of a, like, supposed to be like a black penis, because they feel power when associated themselves with the ability to produce black genetic material. That's why he's carrying that thing, that whipping stick. So yeah, many symbols to decode, great film to decode. Also, just to see how like the Europeans, white people, do not care about not even their own white life. It's literally war game to them. They use this earth as a playground / battleground for them. Like there's a whole how they go about war, just so like just know like human life has no value in terms of like, rather than like, you know, it being efficient, like how many men is gonna take for us to like hold this position and like kill everybody. Like just good movie to watch, good movie to help you decode this white supremacy world. Patton, man. I mean, Patton. I'll put it in chat again.
Patton, yeah, that's definitely something I want to watch, because just seeing how many times he reiterated, we're going to kick ass, we're going to rip their guts out, all these connotations, and usually with something that's revolutionary or war conversations, it's a thing of we're going to go in and we're going to get what's rightfully ours. Like the things that war is usually waged over, like them feeling a threat of the 9/11 attacks, even though it was like self-organized, but just having to create that threat element so they can go to war. There was no conversation of anybody being a threat other than the fact they wanted to kick somebody's ass. And then the expression of what you're going to tell your grandchild's going into the fact that they think about their annihilation, so they're now taking it years ahead. Like, what are you going to tell your child that you did it to ensure their survival and to ensure that they're ruling? You know,
Yeah,
it's
so
very interesting.
yeah, yeah, especially how he's referring to like the white Nazis as the Hun, like the part where he's like, we're gonna grab him by the neck and we're gonna like just basically we're gonna beat the shit out of him. That whole part, I'm just reminded of like police, a montage of police brutality. You know, it's like, oh, I feel bad. I feel bad for what we're gonna do to those poor bastards being the victims of white supremacy. Just, just constantly being destroyed. You know, just having white people come into our place and just blow it all to hell or gentrify it or something destructive to it, put drugs in it.
And what's really sad is that history will tell us throughout time that it was usually Black people on these front lines, so they were getting the honor kills. And it's almost like you can add respectability to yourself if you volunteer yourself or give yourself up for your country.
Yep. Toy soldiers.
Yeah, he said he was going to use their entrails to grease the wheels on their equipment.
As part of the dehumanization process of war, dehumanizing your enemy.
And that's the way they were able to keep us oppressed all throughout slavery. Just heinous torture. You would never even, I mean, the average, a normal human being couldn't even think of some of the things.
Yeah, that's the problem our ancestors had. We didn't know the danger of the white mind.
Yeah.
Like I see the white people as like this new disease that just scientists did not know the danger of it. You know, I didn't know like this disease is gonna spread until like this plague. You know, they were just not figuring out that that it is a disease. You know, and it's a disease that like spreads to like the physical. You know, it's so like deadly that it can destroy buildings, destroy whole cities, Nagasaki, Hiroshima. You know, Iraq, Syria. You know, this is a deadly disease. You know, it destroys the mind. You know, destroys your body. So this, you know, I'm just saying this is really dealing with some deadly force.
Can go on forever. This is a whole nother convention, that clip.
Yeah. All right, I'm about ready to